President Trump is hoping to pivot to taxes today, but what happened in Helsinki is still reverberating around here. And President Trump returned in darkness to the White House last night after a long trip, but he came home to a barrage of criticism.
That changed as of about 4 hours ago.
The president was hoping for a new era of U.S.-Russian relations by meeting with President Vladimir Putin. But his reluctance to criticize Putin for U.S. election meddling stole almost all of the headlines, and many Republican critics did not hold back.
The president's comments made us look as a nation more like a pushover.
A Trump ally, Newt Gingrich, called it the most serious mistake of his presidency. And Democrats were quick to return to their theory that Putin has incriminating information about Trump.
If that's not the explanation, that Putin has something on it, what is it? What the heck could it be?
A former CIA director, John Brennan, went further, calling the president's actions nothing short of treasonous.
I was able to get a sense of his soul.
It is true that Putin has vexed one American leader after another. President Bush once said he found Putin trustworthy. President Obama was caught on an open mic asking Russia's then-President Medvedev to promise Putin more U.S. flexibility. And, of course, the now infamous reset button for Russian relations that never quite took hold. Now, President Trump clearly feels conflicted between U.S. intelligence agencies that say Russia interfered with the 2016 election and a Russian leader who says he didn't.
I have great confidence in my intelligence people, but I will tell you that President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today.
Now, President Trump has certainly weathered criticism before from both Democrats and Republicans, but this time around, much of it is coming from big Trump supporters as well. In Washington, Doug Luzader, Fox News.
An explosion of lava hurls molten rock hundreds of feet into the air, some of the fiery barrage crashing through the roof of a tourism boat.
Plume actually exploded about 300 yards in the air. Particles of the lava actually landed on the vessel, damaged most parts of the vessel.
State and local officials are now investigating Monday's tour accident. The boat, operated by Lava Ocean Tours, was carrying tourists on a sightseeing trip off the coast of the Big Island. They were getting an up-close look at the lava spewing from the Kilauea volcano as it pours into the ocean when the lava bomb struck. Another nearby vessel captured the immediate aftermath, and at one point in the video you could see Mother Nature's fury as lightning strikes inside the cloud of smoke.
We've seen parts of the lava on the vessel when we pulled up to it. There's a few big chunks that was on the roof, and we could see chunks laying all over the side of the boat and on the floor of the boat.
23 people on the boat were injured by the hot volcanic blobs. It took about an hour for the vessel to return to port in Hilo. That's when 3 passengers were taken to the hospital, including a woman in her 20s who suffered a broken leg. She's listed in serious condition. 10 others who sustained less serious injuries were driven to the hospital, and another 10 were treated on the scene by paramedics. This is the worst casualty incident to date since Kilauea began erupting in March. Prior to this, the most serious injury occurred when a man was hit by flying lava, shattering his leg. Chris DeMeo, Fox News.
It's a beautiful day for baseball here in Washington, D.C. Last night, superstars Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber put on quite the show for the Home Run Derby. And before we get to the game tonight, let's take a look at what the fans have had to enjoy all week. It's baseball's biggest fan fest ever. From the merchandise to the art to the legends.
They don't always get a chance to see us, talk to us. This is great how we can interact. Love it.
New to the event this year, everything needed to get fans game ready. Like batting cages, strength and agility training, and a mini diamond for the kids.
Is this awesome or what?
It's a week Washington Nationals owner Mark Lerner has waited on for years after countless requests to host.
We were ecstatic to be a part of this. Major League Baseball has been a joy to work with. It's been our honor to assist them every step of the way.
There's an aura to it. There's a vibe to it that just feels special. And, I think it reminds a lot of folks like myself, it takes you back to childhood.
And fans here are soaking it all in.
We're not Nationals fans, we're Cubs fans, but, we do support the local team, and this, I think it's a great environment.
Excited to see my boy Judge, and excited to see Severino playing in the game. It's going to be great.
But for those who couldn't get a ticket, life-size displays of all the players were placed in Freedom Plaza. And of course, baseball in the nation's capital isn't complete without a visit from a few presidents.
And that's what it's all about. Being in Washington, D.C. in July, talking about baseball.
This is the 5th time Washington, D.C. is hosting the MLB All Star game, and the first since 1969. At Nationals Field in Washington, D.C., Ray Bogan, Fox News.
You gotta be kidding me, man. How you doing? That's unbelievable.
It's been 49 years since Major League Baseball's All-Star Game was played in the nation's capital. But even longer since Navy Captain Dick Tangeman spoke at length to his classmate from Brooklyn, Hall of Fame Yankees manager Joe Torre.
When I found out you were going to be here,
Kind.
your face stuck out to me because there was a picture of our grade. It was wild.
It's because I'm handsome too, Joe, right?
What else could it be? Yeah. Well, we went to, grade school together, PS 207.
Tangeman would go on to fly over 40 combat missions. On May 5th, 1968, Tangeman's Vigilante jet was shot down 200 miles south of Hanoi, the beginning of 5 years in captivity, including the notorious Hanoi Hilton. Tangeman credits his years playing baseball to help him survive repeated torture.
No matter what happens, come back fighting just as hard the next day. That's like you lost the game before, come back tomorrow.
So when Joe Torre won the MVP in 1971, you had no idea?
I didn't know for a while that we were on the moon.
In 1973, nearly 600 Americans returned home. Major League Baseball presented each former prisoner a golden ticket to see any regular season game in any stadium free of charge.
It was great. It was a shock.
Is there an expiration date on that pass?
Nope.
To me, I always felt that baseball is a game of life. You play it every day. You got to eliminate highs and lows and just, you fall down, you get up, and you keep moving.
Torre promises the next reunion will be much sooner. In Washington, Lucas Tomlinson, Fox News.
Either late 96.
Okay, big All-Star Week. Everybody knows that, right? But have you been to FanFest? There's still time to go. It's down at the convention center. There's so much going on. I got to say, there's so much going on for kids, too. You can actually play baseball. You can hit in the batting cages. There's virtual reality baseball game. And I got to say, there's something maybe for the adults, too, and you don't have to be too rich because it's an auction, so you're competing against other people. I want to introduce you to somebody. This is David Hunt with Hunt Auctions. This is really pretty cool. An actual live auction at FanFest for the All-Star Week.
Yeah, it's been a great week already, and it culminates for us with our big live auction the second day tomorrow. Lots of incredible pieces.
So you've already auctioned, obviously, a lot of things off. Tomorrow, does it kind of culminate with this really cool thing behind us right here? This has got to be very, a lot of people are going to have to want to be bidding on this.
It does. I mean, it's a
What is it?
It's a Babe Ruth game used bat, professional model bat from the early 1920s. Should end up being the most expensive piece in the sale, around $100,000 to $200,000.
For that?
It's amazing. I mean, his name still just evokes such emotion in people. Little kids that come through here, they
know about the Bambino.
They do. They see the Bryce Harpers and the Machados and the modern players, but then they come over and say, that's a Babe Ruth ball, that's a Babe Ruth bat, and it makes them very excited.
So there's the ball. Now,
Yeah.
so all of this gets auctioned off tomorrow?
It does. We've got the last day of the auction tomorrow, one more day of the appraisal fair. If anybody brings down things, our experts will give them an appraised value of the piece as well.
They have to be here to bid on this?
No, they can bid online at huntauctions.com. You can see all the remaining items tonight and drop your bids in.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to find out how much this brought. You've already have other things that have been auctioned off too. Yeah. Tell us about some of these pictures.
The collection today was the Archives of Photophile, which is Major League Baseball's photo provider of licensed images. And these are the original images that they used to replicate pieces, but some of them brought just extraordinary amounts of money. We had a few Walter Johnson photos bringing in excess of $10,000, and it led up to, of course, again, Babe Ruth, where this particular photograph ended up selling. The estimate was about $15,000 to $25,000, and it ended up selling for over $50,000.
Oh my gosh, piece. That is amazing. David, thank you so much. FanFest runs, well, it's over basically for today, but tomorrow, all day long, come on down, and you can get on in. It's $30 for kids, $35 for adults. From FanFest, Gary McGrady, Fox 5 Local News.
We've got at least 1, 2, 3 homicides, 1 aggravated robbery, attempted murder, and 1 home invasion robbery.
Houston, Texas police are looking for 46-year-old Jose Gilberto Rodriguez, who they are calling a person of strong interest. Authorities believe he may be responsible for 3 murders that took place over a 4-day period. The first incident was a home invasion robbery Friday night. 62-year-old Pamela Johnson was shot and killed inside her home. Her car was found at the Willowbrook Mall on Saturday. That same day, surveillance video captured him inside the mall, and a second woman, 28-year-old Allie Barrow, was fatally shot inside a mattress store across from the mall. The body of a third victim, Edward Magana, was discovered at another mattress store about 2 miles away on Monday.
This guy's motive appears to be robbery in a lot of cases.
And all 3 victims were killed by gunfire. Houston police believe the murders point to a serial killer. They're also linking Rodriguez to the robbery and non-fatal shooting of a Metro Houston bus driver Monday.
We can't release all the details, but all these cases we feel have some linkages to each other.
But until Rodriguez is caught, Houston residents will remain on edge.
It's scary because I was here. I came to work. I didn't want to unlock my door.
Rodriguez has several previous criminal convictions. Police say he is on parole and removed his ankle monitor just a few days ago. He's not yet been charged with any crimes related to the murders. In Los Angeles, Marianne Rafferty, Fox News.
I've been doing this all my life.
Roz Halili knows these waters well.
Usually these are early mornings.
As an oyster distributor, Halili and other commercial fishermen have felt the ups and downs of the seafood industry in Galveston Bay. Hurricanes are a constant danger.
Hurricane Ike battered this region's oyster population in 2008, with Hurricane Harvey dealing a devastating blow as well. But Halili says the threat of severe weather won't deter them.
The fresh water that came through, it killed half the population or more in Galveston Bay.
To yield sustainable harvests, Halili's family business, Prestige Oysters, has been planting limestone to create reefs in the Gulf of Mexico every year over the last decade. This latest project is the first new reef on a private lease in the area in about 40 years.
What we're doing is building up that bottom to have, a good substrate for oysters, so when they begin to grow, they won't wither and die. They'll have something to attach to.
What we hope that is in the future we can restore a lot of these reefs.
Environmental expert George Guillen says oyster restoration efforts will help the ecosystem and safety for coastal residents come hurricane season.
It creates a barrier when it's big enough to large waves. It will actually dissipate some of the energy as you have waves going across these large reefs.
The oyster reefs also help battle hurricane erosion.
Being able to benefit, our business and the ecosystem at the same time, it's a great feeling.
Halili likely won't yield a harvest from this site until 2 or 3 years from now, when the oysters reach market size. But out here, resiliency is key. In San Leon, Texas, Madeline Rivera, Fox News.
I'm here to tell you today that Washington has failed us.
In a major rebuke, California Democrats Saturday rejected the grande dame of their party, 26-year veteran Senator Dianne Feinstein, endorsing her challenger instead, Liberal firebrand Kevin De Leon.
I'm going to work really hard to earn the votes and the confidence of many voters across the political spectrum.
De Leon is a champion of progressive causes, a torchbearer for the hard left. He authored the state sanctuary bill, favors free medical care, wants to dismantle ICE, and impeach President Trump.
We have a lot of Democrats who want a stronger voice, someone who's not on the sidelines, but rather someone who's on the front lines to contend with this president who seeks to do everything within his power to undermine our great state, California.
Analysts say the endorsement reflects the increasing strength of liberals and progressives within the state Democratic Party.
To those who are on the left in the Democratic Party in California, she's considered a moderate who compromises too much with Republicans or even with Donald Trump.
The endorsement means De Leon's image will appear in millions of campaign pamphlets and show up in the official state voting guide as the party nominee, not to mention campaign money and volunteers.
As the report says.
But will it make a difference? Feinstein won the June primary with 70% of the Democratic vote and 44% overall, compared to just 12% by De Leon. Feinstein has $10 million in campaign cash compared to less than $700,000 for her challenger, according to federal reports.
If this gets at all close, and I doubt it does, but if it gets at all close, it's the Republicans who are voting who will probably decide the race.
And that could help Republican turnout in several close House races. Feinstein's campaign played down the snub, saying the 85-year-old is confident of being reelected to a fifth term. In Los Angeles, William LaJeunesse, Fox News.
I'm calling from the Health Insurance Enrollment Center.
This is Todd with
I'm
the
calling
Fulfillment
because health
Department.
insurance
It's the evolution of the modern day scam. What started on the phone with what's called vishing,
This call is officially a final note.
then moved to email or phishing.
And now you're kind of seeing an uptick in a wave of smishing. So that's text messages that are coming in on your phone.
Bill Harden with Charles River and Associates says texting is the way many of us now talk, and bad guys want to confuse you through text by pretending to be a utility, store, even your bank to get your account information.
So you've got all these filters and everything within email, but on text messages, you really don't have that kind of filter.
So Harden and his team demonstrated for us just how easily and quickly criminals can set up these fake sites and send you bogus messages meant to trick you into handing over usernames and passwords.
We're going to play the bad guy, all right? And with that, we're going to start a campaign.
For this example, Harden created a fake Verizon website. It's identical to the real thing except for the URL.
So step 2 is now I've got to go acquire data, so I got to go buy phone numbers that I want to go out and smish.
Harden says criminals can buy thousands of phone numbers for cheap. He can send this bogus message to the numbers he bought with a link to his site, not Verizon's.
I sent the message. I have users that clicked. I have users that entered in credentials. And now I have all of these username and passwords.
Harden says this database of usernames and passwords can go for thousands on the dark web and only took minutes to set up.
It's quick.
Is it cheap?
It's cheap, yes.
What's also quick and free is how you can protect yourself.
Rotating your username and password is always a great start.
That way, if criminals try to use your credentials, it won't work. Protect your identity and bank account. Dawn Hasbrook, Fox News.
Professional wedding photographer Katie Kuhn takes a lot of pride in capturing that special moment between a bride and a groom. But she says a con artist posing as a would-be groom captured her attention last week.
Or he wasn't filling out the contract. He said he was having issues. And then he started getting really angry with me about signing the contract.
These were phone conversations.
These are text messages.
Okay. Have you ever had a phone conversation?
I tried to call him and he wouldn't pick up the phone.
Kuhn says the man sent her this check for $3,200 after only one email conversation, then asked for a partial refund of $1,300 just a couple of days later.
So what he said was, you know what, I've decided to cancel the birthday. The expenses are becoming too much. And can you send me that money back? And I said, well, I can give it to you at the wedding, or you can meet me in person. Because at this point, I knew something wasn't right.
The North Fulton photographer reported her concerns to Milton police last Wednesday. She says they did not take a report since she never cashed the check and no crime was committed. But she still wants other wedding photographers and vendors to step back and take a good look at the bigger picture when a potential customer looks suspicious.
It's not believing absolutely everything that somebody says over the internet or in your email. It's talking to people on the phone, trying to have an actual conversation with somebody to find out if they are genuine, if they are real, and just use your judgment.
Thank you so much. Struggling to keep the tears at bay, Walter Carr got the surprise of his life Monday. A new car presented to him after his story of determination went viral.
I just wanted to get to my job and show people that I was dedicated to the job.
The story begins early Saturday morning. Walter, all set to start a new job at 8 a.m., helping a family move in Pelham. The problem, he lives in Homewood, and his car was broken down. So what does Walter do? He decides to walk to work, setting out at midnight to go the 20-plus miles.
When I first saw him, he was actually sitting down, so I guess he was catching his breath.
By now, it was 3 a.m. Pelham police officer Mark Knighton stopped to ask what Walter was doing. Walter told him he was walking to work and still had another 15 miles to go. That's when Knighton and 2 other officers took him to breakfast. Another officer then took him to his job, where he was to help Jenny Lamey's family move.
Just the heart that it took to do that, and you know, I just keep thinking about him. It's almost like I use them. Just think about Walter. What would Walter do?
Deeply moved, Lamey posted the story on Facebook, where it went viral. She was hoping to help, but Luke Markland, the CEO of Bellhops, which Walter works for, beat her to it by giving him one of his own personal cars.
I love helping people, so this car is making it much easier to do what I need to do to help and expand myself out more.
Melanie Posey, WBRC, Fox 6 News, on your side.
Even on the cloudiest of days, the art of the neon sign in Tucson stands out. On Congress, 4th Avenue, 6th, and on the south side near Broadway, where there's a man with an electrifying passion for his collection.
I can't explain it, but I do.
Jude Cook has worked with signs for decades, restoring several well-known icons around town.
There we go.
He's collected them for just as long.
The collection got so big that at one point I said, you know, you're going to need to move these to your office. And so, you know, a lot of them migrated there.
2 years ago, after visiting neon sign museums around the country, the couple had their own bright idea.
We should do this, you know.
He and his wife are opening Ignite, a sign art museum in Tucson, a city known for its neon.
We had a nice collection of signs largely because we were on one of the main driving routes from Mexico to Canada.
Familiar commercial logos and replicas of local light-up landmarks deck the walls.
The stuff that's nearest and dearest to me is the stuff for Tucson.
It's a kind of buzz he hopes will educate people.
The signs get taken for granted. You know, they're there, but they're there until they're gone, and then once they're gone, they're completely forgotten.
And preserve history, just as he has in years past. On the south side, Heather Jansen, KOLD News 13, live local 8 breaking.
Three, 2, 0.
This is the moment the world remembers, the day a spacecraft launches into space.
Gets very hot, goes very fast.
But these are the days this team of Coloradans at Lockheed Martin remember. The hours, weeks, and months spent building a shuttle, in this case a twin of the Orion spacecraft, which NASA hopes will one day take man to Mars.
This spacecraft feels to me like it's my third child. I think about it every day. I think about it, keeping it safe. It's become a major part of me and all the people that are working on it.
Dan Qualley is the Orion test manager. This spacecraft is a twin of the one that will actually fly, a 5-story model that will be subjected to all kinds of tests and environments that the real shuttle will be exposed to both during and after launch.
Unlike other satellites that we build, the Orion spacecraft not only gets sent out with astronauts, but it also returns to Earth. So it has a lot of environments that it's exposed to during the mission that a typical spacecraft would never need to survive.
5 tests are being conducted on the Orion here in Colorado. Everything from acoustic tests, which expose the spacecraft to the sound environment the rocket produces, to lightning tests.
It's important to do this in order to ensure that the spacecraft is safe for astronauts to fly on it.
The first manned Orion mission is scheduled for 2022. It's a spacecraft meant to take humans where they have never gone before.
Orion is our nation's spacecraft.
Thanks to the work of these men and women right here in Colorado.
Just 29 years old, Maria Butina is accused of acting as a secret agent for Moscow. According to this arrest affidavit, she was working for a high-level official in the Russian government. Together, they wanted to establish back-channel lines of communication from the Kremlin to D.C., influencing politicians and advancing Russian interests. They set their sights on the Republican Party and the National Rifle Association. Butina's love of guns is well documented on her Facebook page. This is a photo of her with the head of the NRA, Wayne LaPierre. The FBI says Butina took steps to infiltrate political groups, like the NRA, to advance the interests of the Russian Federation. The FBI believes Butina even used the National Prayer Breakfast as part of her influence campaign. She attended in 2016 and 17. According to the affidavit, she and the Russian official she was working with often communicated through direct message on Twitter. This was a message from Butina 1 month before the 2016 election. Time will tell. We made our bet. I am following our game. I will be connecting the people from the prayer breakfast to this group.
"15-year-old Catherine Carricker had her first seizure when she was just 3 years old. Within a few months, Catherine's uncontrolled epilepsy affected her motor functions and her speech, and the seizures just kept coming.
She can have as many as 50 seizures a day or as few as 2 or 3.
Catherine's mother, Terry Carricker, provided this video to show the harsh reality of what Catherine goes through every single day. Seeing her daughter struggling convinced Terry to try everything she could to help, even buying medical marijuana illegally before Texas allowed people with Catherine's condition to obtain it.
And it was amazing, the benefit that it had for her.
About 2 years ago, Catherine's mom signed her up for a study to test out Epidiolex, a medication made with the marijuana component cannabis oil, or CBD, which is known to produce a relaxing effect on the brain.
It cut her seizure numbers approximately in half. It reduced the intensity of most of her seizures and the duration of them.
Catherine has been on Epidiolex ever since, with very few side effects. Last week, the FDA approved the medication for people with specific epileptic diagnoses. Catherine made the cut.
It hasn't been a miracle drug, and it won't be for all kids. I do know some kids that have achieved seizure freedom with it. But, you know, it's another tool in the toolbox, basically, for doctors that are dealing with hard-to-treat epilepsy.
Terry is hopeful that the FDA will consider other prescription drugs containing marijuana components for hard-to-treat diagnoses.
The benefit of having an FDA-approved drug, of course, the primary one, is that over time, eventually insurance companies will pay for it, which will make it more accessible for a larger number of people.
FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb wrote this about the decision, quote, "This is an important medical advance, but it's also important to note that this is not an approval of marijuana or all of its components. This is the approval of one specific CBD medication for a specific use." Terry believes the move will convince more doctors to prescribe CBD and more parents to feel comfortable treating their children with it.
I'm hopeful that this is the beginning of a brand new era of medication, basically.
Jennifer Kendall, Fox News.
For those of you that don't know me, I'm Matt Peitzman.
With only a few days left before summer vacation,
Today what we're going to be doing,
Matt Peitzman students are about to turn in one last project. Since December, 5 students met after school till sometimes late in the evening. Over 300 hours were spent designing and making guitars for Governor Wolf's STEM competition. They made it all the way to the state finals, but fell a little short of winning the top prize. Of course, after, their teacher offered some words of encouragement.
Right at the end, I said to the 5 team members that we may not have won the state competition, but no one else in that competition has what we just had.
You see, this group made up of 9th through 12th graders all decided early on that 2 guitars made will be donated to veterans who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder.
This means a lot to me, and I can't thank all of you enough for this.
Jonathan Bittner, alongside Annabelle Valentine, are taken aback by the teens' thoughtfulness.
I often wonder if people still remember what we did and what people are still doing, and to have high school kids who may or may not have been alive during the attacks of September 11th, to do something like this for us who served is incredible.
That is gnarly. We got a little note in here, Rams Originals. Guitars crafted by Penridge students. Thank you.
Annabelle served in the Navy alongside the Marines. He started playing guitar at the local college after returning home.
Strumming the chords, feeling the vibrations go through you, and it was a very good coping mechanism, very therapeutic.
Play a little something.
Jonathan started playing when he was a little kid and actually had a few guitars of his own.
Came into some financial issues a couple years ago and went through each guitar one by one, sold them. Part of it was like giving away a piece of me.
For Jonathan, music is a way for him to escape and clear his thoughts.
Really looking forward to just being able to sit down just by myself and just play music again.
The students here may not have understood how much their generosity meant till they saw it in person.
It was really, really heartwarming.
Just a feeling like that we really touched them and that we were able to do this for them. It's just amazing.
An amazing moment that they will remember for a lifetime in Bucks County. Bill Rohr, Fox News.
In the early to mid-1970s, a killer roamed these streets, preying on gay men, meeting them in bars, luring them away by offering to sketch them, and then investigators at the time said stabbing at least 5 and possibly as many as 14 men to death. The case making headlines in the city. Newspapers at the time documented his killing streak. His habit of drawing his victims earned him the nickname the Doodler. At the time, investigators said 3 men had escaped the Doodler. Police interviewed the men and developed this sketch. Back then, investigators repeatedly interviewed one man and said they were certain he was their suspect. With different attitudes in the 1970s towards the LGBT community and fears of being outed, eventually leads in the case turned cold, and San Francisco police never made an arrest. Today in San Francisco, even longtime residents say memories of the Doodler are starting to fade.
I do remember the name from that time period, the mid-70s. There was also the Zodiac Killer.
KTVU began looking into this cold case in March, digging into our archives and looking for any information about the killer. Then, just a month later, the capture of the accused Golden State Killer grabbed national headlines. We took the information we developed on the Doodler to a San Francisco police cold case investigator. That investigator refocused police attention on the killer, saying officers would be reaching out to witnesses and victims who'd escaped. In a statement today, police say they've developed a new age-progressed version of the composite and are working on details to release the new sketch. As of today, police say the case is still open and they're looking for the killer. Leaders in the gay community say in the 1970s the relationship between police and gay men was tense, and that may have stopped more victims or witnesses from coming forward with what they knew. Now, though, things have changed.
There's a good relationship with the police department. There are gay and lesbian police officers and sergeants and things like that now. You would never have heard anything like that in the 1970s.
San Francisco police say investigators today are looking at this case from top to bottom, even looking to see if 5 victims were in fact killed by one man. And one more look at that composite sketch from the 1970s. Police say at this point there are no new developments in this investigation. They are hoping that someone with a key piece of information may bring them what they need to find the killer and close this case. Again, investigators are looking for the community's help in finding that tip they need. In San Francisco, Christian Kaftan, KTVU, Fox 2 News.
You may remember the All Star Armed Service Classic was last week, and tonight an Army Staff Sergeant and a member of the U.S. Navy hit some home runs. And a big fan favorite, the Nationals' own Bryce Harper. This was only his second home run derby.
I like watching him play. He's he's probably my favorite player. He's just a really fun guy to watch. Hopefully he can stay in D.C., but if he goes away, it was great having him in D.C.
Not everyone could even get tickets for tonight's game, but that's okay. You didn't necessarily need them to join in on the fun. Playball Park was right next to Nats Park, and it offered up some interactive fan experiences for baseball and softball lovers, like hitting your own home runs. But things did get a little dicey for a while there. The park had to be evacuated temporarily. People were told to seek shelter because of impending weather.
We're hoping the workouts don't get closed. We're pretty excited for today, and now, of course, the weather.
I was kind of surprised because I wasn't sure with the weather it was going to let up and let everybody back in. I wasn't sure what was happening.
How'd you feel to be able to come back in?
Great. It's a great experience down here.
President Trump's snap assessment of the summit with Vladimir Putin, relations with Russia are already on the rebound.
And we're getting together, and we have a chance to do some great things.
The commander-in-chief praising the historic meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin Monday. The pair talked about Syria and North Korean nuclear proliferation. But it was
Let me tell you guys, our newsroom is all abuzz for the All-Star game. That is tonight here in D.C. at Nationals Park, and we're just talking about it. Some of our colleagues all getting ready to head down there because it's already buzzing. All those restaurants and bars by Nationals Park, which you just saw in that previous package. Actually, guys, running through some of the top stories of the day. A lot of them fallout from the Helsinki summit from yesterday, but a lot of them in anticipation of this big sports event. MLB, of course, hosting their annual All-Star game here in D.C. We're all super excited to wear our jerseys from our hometown, our hats, kind of get down there and let the partying begin, which is, I'm already told it's already starting down there at all the places kind of surrounding the park. So even if you don't have tickets, people are heading down there. They're going to be celebrating. So definitely, if you're in the DMV area, get in on the fun. We're going to be really kind of working on our stuff today and then counting down the clock to when we can get down there. So super exciting stuff today. But in all seriousness, guys, there is a lot of sort of reaction on the Hill today from yesterday's meeting with President Trump and Putin. A lot of reaction coming out about what President Trump had to say about the United States and his own intelligence agencies, among other things. But right now we have one live feed coming in, and that is on the Hill. It's going to be a Senate Democrat meeting about immigration reform. I know we're going to have a lot of kind of thrown you around to different feeds today about reaction from yesterday, but today these Senate Democrats are going to be debating the immigration bill that is impending. So let's go over to that live feed and then we'll switch it up when we have something else.
An explosion of lava hurls molten rock hundreds of feet into the air, some of the fiery barrage crashing through the roof of a tourism boat.
Plume actually exploded about 300 yards in the air. Particles of the lava actually landed on the vessel, damaged most parts of the vessel.
State and local officials are now investigating Monday's tour accident. The boat, operated by Lava Ocean Tours, was carrying tourists on a sightseeing trip off the coast of the Big Island. They were getting an up-close look at the lava spewing from the Kilauea volcano as it pours into the ocean when the lava bomb struck. Another nearby vessel captured the immediate aftermath, and at one point in the video you can see Mother Nature's fury as lightning strikes inside the cloud of smoke.
We've seen parts of the lava on the vessel when we pulled up to it. There's a few big chunks that was on the roof, and we could see chunks laying all over the side of the boat and on the floor of the boat.
23 people on the boat were injured by the hot volcanic blobs. It took about an hour for the vessel to return to port in Hilo. That's when 3 passengers were taken to the hospital, including a woman in her 20s who suffered a broken leg. She's listed in serious condition. 10 others who sustained less serious injuries were driven to the hospital, and another 10 were treated on the scene by paramedics. This is the worst casualty incident to date since Kilauea began erupting in March. Prior to this, the most serious injury occurred when a man was hit by flying lava, shattering his leg. Chris DeMeo, Fox News.
It's a beautiful day for baseball here in Washington, D.C. Last night, superstars Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber put on quite the show for the Home Run Derby. And before we get to the game tonight, let's take a look at what the fans have had to enjoy all week. It's baseball's biggest fan fest ever. From the merchandise to the art to the legends.
They don't always get a chance to see us, talk to us. This is great how we can interact. Love it.
New to the event this year, everything needed to get fans game ready. Like batting cages, strength and agility training, and a mini diamond for the kids.
Oh! Is this awesome or what?
It's a week Washington Nationals owner Mark Lerner has waited on for years after countless requests to host.
We were ecstatic to be a part of this. Major League Baseball has been a joy to work with. It's been our honor to assist them every step of the way.
There's an aura to it. There's a vibe to it that just feels special. And, I think it reminds a lot of folks like myself, it takes you back to childhood.
And fans here are soaking it all in.
We're not Nationals fans, we're Cubs fans, but, we do support the local team, and this, I think it's a great environment.
Excited to see my boy Judge, and excited to see Severino playing in the game. It's going to be great.
But for those who couldn't get a ticket, life-size displays of all the players were placed in Freedom Plaza. And of course, baseball in the nation's capital isn't complete without a visit from a few presidents.
And that's what it's all about. Being in Washington, D.C. in July, talking about baseball.
This is the 5th time Washington, D.C. is hosting the MLB All Star game, and the first since 1969. At Nationals Field in Washington, D.C., Ray Bogan, Fox News.
You gotta be kidding me, man. How you doing? That's unbelievable.
It's been 49 years since Major League Baseball's All-Star Game was played in the nation's capital. But even longer since Navy captain Dick Tangeman spoke at length to his classmate from Brooklyn, Hall of Fame Yankees manager Joe Torre.
When I found out you were going to be here, your face stuck out to me because there was a picture of our grade. It was wild.
It's because I'm handsome too, Joe.
What
right?
else could it be?
Yeah.
Well, we went to, grade school together, PS 207.
Tangeman would go on to fly over 40 combat missions. On May 5, 1968, Tangeman's Vigilante jet was shot down 200 miles south of Hanoi, the beginning of 5 years in captivity, including the notorious Hanoi Hilton. Tangeman credits his years playing baseball to help him survive repeated torture.
No matter what happens, come back fighting just as hard the next day. That's like you lost the game before, come back tomorrow.
So when Joe Torre won the MVP in 1971, you had no idea?
I didn't know for a while that we were on the moon.
In 1973, nearly 600 Americans returned home. Major League Baseball presented each former prisoner a golden ticket to see any regular season game in any stadium free of charge.
It was great. It was a shock.
Is there an expiration date on that pass?
Nope.
To me, I always felt that baseball is a game of life.
Their parents, and in many cases the forcible separation of children from their parents. So I am joined by Senator Cortez Masto and Senator Merkley and a representative of Kids in Need of Defense Kind to talk about a bill that we are proposing that is called the Reunite Act, which is designed and intended to create a law that will exist permanently to ensure that never again will the United States government have the ability or the power to separate children from their parents in the way that has been done. So let's talk about the facts and where we are right now. There are still, as of today, nearly 2,600 children who are separated from their parents, who have been torn from their parents. And it is clear when the administration created this no-tolerance policy that there was never the intention and certainly the design of any system to reunify these children with their parents. And so what we have seen over the ensuing weeks is complete pandemonium. We have seen the trauma that these children are experiencing, trauma that extends to not only their emotional state, but in many cases their physical state. Experts, pediatricians, psychologists, psychiatrists are talking about the fact that this trauma in many of these cases will probably be lifelong in terms of its impact. And we have seen similar trauma for these parents, many of whom didn't know at the time that their children were taken from them that it would be anything permanent. Many of these parents who still don't know exactly where their children are, and other parents who have been denied the ability to have any consistent contact with their children. And let's be clear about what this is. For any parent or anyone who has parented a child, knowing that your child goes to sleep at night not hearing their parent's voice telling them they love you, for that child who cannot go to sleep at night having been read a bedtime story by their parent, all because of a policy that was created by an administration to punish and penalize these parents as a supposed disincentive to immigration. It is not reflective of the ideals of who we are as a country. It is not reflective of a civil society, and it's got to stop. And so this bill is designed to address that. Weeks ago in California, I visited the Otay Mesa Detention Center. There I met with mothers who had been separated from their children. And they told me stories that were not only the stories of the violence that they fled in Honduras and El Salvador, not only stories about the trauma of the trip and the passage through another country, the entire country of Mexico, to reach our border, but then they told me of being separated from their children, not knowing why, not knowing when they would see those children again. And they told me of the conditions in the detention center, which I saw, a detention center that looked exactly like every prison I've ever visited when I was a prosecutor. They told me the stories of how they were not allowed to phone their children with any consistency, and they were charged for those phone calls, contrary to what the folks who are running that prison told me. People, by the way, who do not work, the people who run that prison, who do not work directly for DHS or ICE, but instead are contract workers, who clearly have no sense of responsibility to carry out what should be the role of the United States government, which again is to try and reunify parents with their children instead of separating them. So there's a stunning lack of transparency and accountability in this process as well, both in how it has played out and also the intentions of the administration as we go forward in terms of how they exactly plan to reunify these children. In connection with my position on the Department of Homeland Security Committee, HSGAC, I've asked for over a year, then Secretary Kelly, Acting Secretary Duke, current Secretary Nielsen, and others in a position of authority, what is the policy, what are the protocols, what are the training methods that are being employed by this agency to determine how to, in a least traumatic way, separate the children if that must be done? And what is the plan? What is the protocol? And where is it in terms of how you plan to reunify these children with their parents? What is the time period during which there is a decision that that reunification must happen? What is the process of determining how that reunification will take place? And we've still not received any response. I've asked this administration, through those individuals and others, you say that in some of these cases you're separating those children from their parents because you're concerned that that adult may be a trafficker. So I have asked, show us the cases where you have referred any one of these adults who have brought these children across the border, where any one, not one case, where you have referred that to the Department of Justice for prosecution for trafficking, and they've given us no response. It's extremely lacking, and it is frankly abhorrible, and I would suggest a human rights violation that is being committed by the United States government against these families. And we are better than this. So the Reunite Act is designed to address that, and it comes on the heels of another act that I've been privileged to propose with Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal and that's the Dunn Act, where we are proposing putting moratorium on expansion of any new detention facilities by ICE. We are proposing an increase of the oversight of ICE facilities so we can see what's going on there. We are hearing countless cases of abuses occurring, in particular around these women who are there and even pregnant women. And that the Dunn Act also proposes that we reduce the detention beds by 50% through a more successful and less costly alternative to detention, which is something that was in place before this administration came into being. And today, then, the Reunite Act. So working with Senators Merkley and Cortez Masto, this act is designed to reunify the thousands of children who remain separated from their parents, and again, protect any families in the future who may be subject to this kind of policy. Specifically, the Reunite Act requires immediate reunification of these children with their parents. It requires a sustained and no-cost contact policy, no-cost contact policy between the parents and the children. So that's about the fact that in many of these cases, the parents have to pay to actually be reunified with their children and all that that requires, meaning they have to pay for the transportation to get back to their children or for their children to be rejoined with them. They have to pay for phone calls, things of that nature. And so this act would require that, of course, they would not have to pay for something that was not of their own doing. It would also require access to legal counsel and child advocates, because currently there is not a requirement that the parents and children have those advocates and have lawyers. And so we are forcing these families to navigate this very difficult and opaque system on their own. It will also require unannounced inspections by child welfare organizations so that we can monitor the conditions of these facilities and the circumstances of these children and their parents. And then finally, it will establish an office for locating and reuniting children with their parents, which will be an interagency collaboration between DOJ, DHS, and HHS. And I want to thank Senator Merkley for the work you have done in that regard. And finally, it'll ensure that families will not be reunified in jail. So the administration has made all of this noise about how they're going to try and reunify these families, but it is apparent that where and if they intend to do that, that it will happen in a jail, in one of these facilities, in one of these caged facilities. And we would argue that it is probably not only inhumane, but also not effective and efficient for the government to spend the kind of money that is required to do that, when it has been proven that there are less restrictive settings that have resulted in 99% of the parents with their children showing up for future court appearances. And so finally, again, I'll say, we are better than this. We as a country are better than this. And we should not be playing politics with the lives of these children, these young children and their families. And it's got to stop, and it's got to stop today. So with that, I am pleased to introduce my friend and colleague, Senator Merkley.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Senator Harris, and I'm pleased to join with her and Senator Cortez Masto today to introduce this act. When the administration decided to develop a strategy to deter individuals from seeking asylum when they were fleeing persecution, they went to a very dark and evil place by choosing a strategy deliberately designed to inflict trauma on children. This is not supportable under any moral code. This would not be endorsed by any religious tradition. It has to end immediately. We have to restore these children to their families, and we have to make sure it never happens again. And that's what this act is all about. Let's think about 3 different children. 6-year-old Allison, who we heard pleading on a tape with no pictures, pleading to be placed with her aunt or be able to call her aunt after she was torn out of the arms of her mother at the border. And then we later saw the joyful reunification with her mother, Cindy. Or how about 1-year-old Mateo, which was a different picture because he had been separated for 8 months. And when he was reunited with his father, Jose, did not recognize his father, and his family went on to say that now he is very fearful. When he sees strangers, he thinks they're going to take him. He just grabs me. That's what his mother said about him. Huge trauma inflicted on children. That's what this is about, and that's what this is ending. I want to tell you a story of a third child, Andrea. Her mother fled Honduras after her life was threatened because her family couldn't repay a loan. She was 8 months pregnant. She proceeded to make it through Honduras, make it through Guatemala, make it through Mexico, arrive at a port of entry, and this is the Hidalgo Gallon port of entry, and she crossed that passenger bridge, and she was rebuffed by our border guards time after time after time because they weren't letting anyone through to seek asylum, only people with passports and visas. And I saw those border guards out there with a delegation of other congressional members, stopping individuals as they came to that line in the middle of the bridge, sending them back to the Mexico side where they're extremely vulnerable. When we came off the bridge, when the congressional delegation came off the bridge and went through the doors of the port of entry, there were empty counseling rooms. They said, oh, we're overwhelmed, we have no space, but empty counseling rooms. They did have one holding room with 10 or 12 people in it. And I asked, is anyone in that room seeking asylum? Did they make it across this pedestrian bridge? They said, yes, we have a family. And so we asked to meet that family. And out came a mother carrying her 65-day-old child, Andrea, beautiful little baby girl. And she told me, I thought they'd made exception for her because she had a 2-month-old. They said, no, she said, I was sent back time and time again. I said, how did you get across the United States of America? And at that moment, she got a big smile on her face. She said, I was sent back so many times, I was desperate to come across. And then I saw there's a passenger bridge, or not a passenger, a pedestrian bridge, and there is a car bridge. And out on the car bridge, multi-laned car and truck bridge, there were people washing windows. So I went up. I borrowed a squeegee, and I washed the first car, and I washed the next car, and worked my way all the way to the American side. That's how she got in. Now, there's a couple important things to note in this story. The first is the administration said there's no reason for anyone to cross between ports of entry because they can cross legally at a port of entry and assert asylum. That is a lie if they are blocking people crossing at the port of entry. A second is that when I saw that mother with her little girl having gone through so much trauma in her home country, so much trauma on the road, finally made it here, in my head was the fact a few hours later she might be separated from that little girl. We're not sure what happened to her. But here's what we do know. Under the new policy put forward by Jeff Sessions, because she was a victim of a neighborhood controlled by a gang, a criminal enterprise, rather than by a technical government, she will not qualify. And what awaits her? This treatment of children, enormously horrific. And people say, well, the administration has this new plan. They want to go from family separation to family incarceration. They want to set up internment camps. That is not going to happen. We will be on the warpath here in Congress against any effort to legalize internment camps in the United States of America. It's exactly what the president asked for in his executive order. He asked Congress to act to make this possible. Well, we will not. We will fight this with everything we have. And then people say, well, if not family separation, if not incarceration, what do you propose? We propose what's in this bill, Family Case Management Program. This is a copy of the Inspector General's report on the Family Case Management Program. And what does it say? Of course, this is a program that proceeds to provide someone to check in routinely on families, to make sure they speak their language, write their language, can notify them against about every upcoming check-in, about every hearing. So I was curious to find out, how did it work? This is the program that the administration shut down a year ago. Well, the Inspector General for Homeland Security tells us on page 5. It says, according to ICE, overall program compliance for all 5 regions is an average of 99% for ICE check-ins and appointments. When do you get a program that's 99% effective? This is for check-ins. It goes on, as well as 100% attendance at court hearings. This case management is a respectful, dignified treatment, keeping families together, and they show up for their hearings. And this bill backs saying that we will treat families with respect and dignity. Never are we going to tolerate inflicting trauma on children and trauma on parents as a strategy as this administration concocted. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just say I am pleased and honored to join my colleagues, Senator Harris and Senator Merkley, in introducing the Reunite Act. I don't have to tell all of you, this crisis that we are in was completely manufactured by this administration. Completely manufactured. We are here today because this administration put in an inhumane policy thinking it was okay for deterrent purposes to separate parents from their children, from toddlers. It is outrageous. As Americans, what we value in this country are our families and our kids, and always, always looking out for the best interests of our kids and doing them no harm. And I'll tell you what, I don't care whether you are from the United States, or you're from Nicaragua, Honduras, or what country you are from, we should all be looking out for the best interests of children and their families. And my stories are no different. I went down to the border. I wanted to see for myself not only how this administration was using our taxpayer dollars to house these children and their families. And when I showed up at one of the facilities that was housing the toddlers, Casa Presidente, they would not let me in. Not only did they have a locked door, they even refused to sit down and just talk to me about how they were treating the children and the accommodations for the children and how long they had been there and the ages of the children, the gender of the children, and what we were doing in the future to look out for the best interests. To me, outrageous. Outrageous. And then I went to Isabel Detention Facility to talk to the parents. And Senator Harris is right. And we both know, as former attorneys general, I've been to the prisons in the state of Nevada. And this Isabel Detention Facility is no different than the prisons I visited as the attorney general in the state of Nevada. These parents are being detained in prison. They have no idea what's happening to their children. I talked with 6 mothers, 4 fathers, and each one of them told me the same thing. They asked me where their child is, and they asked me what was going on in the outside world and how long they were going to be there. Because what they told me is they have access to one TV, and anytime the news comes on about family detention or what's happening at the border, the channel is changed. They are put in coveralls, colored coveralls. They're told when to eat, when they can go out in the yard and get some fresh air. And then they're back in their cells or some sort of detained facility and have no idea what's happening. And each one of them had the same story. And I will tell you, I don't know how you could not sit and listen to the stories that these mothers and fathers said with tears in their eyes and not be outraged by what this administration has done. They've come from foreign countries because they are not safe where they are. Who wouldn't pick up their child and take them to a country that is known for protecting others? Who wouldn't? Anna had a 5-year-old daughter. And she did that because her daughter was being threatened, and she was being threatened with her life. And so she made the decision to leave her home country, her own country, her language that she knows, her country that she grew up in. Who wants to do that? But she had to be for the safety of her family. And she trekked across 3,000 miles of dangerous terrain and difficult terrain to get to our border, knowing what she had been told, that Americans will protect you. Americans will be there to fight for you. And when she saw the Border Patrol, she thought, my God, I finally made it. I'm here. And she waved them down thinking, with my daughter, we are going to be protected. And what do? They lock her up. They lock her up. And then they tell her, you need to take your 5-year-old daughter and you need to either put her on that bus or we will do it for you. But we're taking your child away from you. And that was the first time she and her daughter had ever been separated. And every single story that I heard from those parents was the same. Griselda did the same thing with her family. She had a small business. And they were extorting her for money. And if you don't pay those gangs and the criminals the money, then they threaten you with your life or your children's lives, or your daughter can be raped and killed. And so she came to this country for that protection, to protect her family. And I said to every single one of these parents, why didn't you call the police? Why didn't you go to the police for protection? And they looked at me and said, the police are part of the problem. There is no rule of law. There is nobody there to protect us. But we know and we've heard that Americans do just that. And that's why we're here. It is outrageous. And I don't care whether you're a parent, you're not a parent. This is not who we are as a country. But this policy, and let's be clear, this policy was dreamed up by this administration. They never, ever had an intent to reunite these children with their parents. Never. Never had an intent. And believe me, I've talked with them. It's not in their policies or protocols. They've never had to do it before, so they've never done it. And that's what's happening here. And what you have are various agencies, whether it's Border Patrol or ICE or Homeland Security, which oversees those two, and HHS, which oversees the Refugee Resettlement Program. They're not communicating. They don't share information. When the families come in, they give them an alien ID number, and that's it. They don't say who they're connected to, if their parents came with them. They don't say where they're from, other than you've got an alien ID number, and now we're going to sort you like your cattle, based on your gender, based on your age. I went to the processing center where they're actually keeping these families and some kids in these, I don't know how else to say it, but it looked like these little cells that were put together by chain link fence. And they sorted them based on their age and their gender. It was outrageous. And I went to talk to two mothers who had just come here. You could tell they still had the clothes that they came over in. They had not been able to take showers. And they were standing in front of young toddlers who were sitting on a mat behind them. And I assumed those were their kids. And I said, my goodness, when did you come? What's going on? How long have you been here? And how long have your kids been there? And they said, oh, these aren't our kids. Our boys, who are their teenagers, they're housed right over there in another facility, and we can't see them. They're in the same building, but we can't see them because they are separating them based on their age and gender. Can you imagine? Your child is there, but you don't get the opportunity to even see or talk to that child. It's outrageous. So we need policies. We need to continue to fight for these families. I told those parents I would tell their stories and bring them here, and that people in this country are fighting for them. And that's what this is about. We do not stop fighting, because this is about our values, who we are as Americans, and what we project around the world. That when people are in need and there is threat and they're being persecuted, or there's threat of violence against them, that we will help them. And that's what this is about. So thank you so much to my colleagues and all of you for caring enough to be here today and continuing to tell this story and fight with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Senators Harris, Merkley, and Cortez Masto, for your incredible leadership in introducing this critical legislation, the Reunite Act, which would restore compassion to the U.S. immigration system by ensuring that children are afforded the opportunity to reunify with their parents. It is time to stop the cruelty of punishing innocent families who have committed no crime, but have simply asked the United States for protection from the violence that plagues their home countries. It is time to remember that what makes America truly great is our adherence to the principles of due process and fundamental fairness, and our support for human rights. For the thousands of children who are still separated from their parents, reunification cannot come soon enough. These children, many of whom have fled horrific violence in their home countries, deserve our government's best efforts and protection, not the trauma inflicted upon them by continued separation from those they need the most. In our work at KIND, we regularly work with children ranging from toddlers to teenagers who have suffered rape, abduction, and the murder of friends and family. We need to treat these children humanely, not inflict further harm on them. About 3 weeks ago, KIND staff reported that they had met with a mother detained at the Port Isabel Detention Center in Texas. She was frantic. Her 4 children had been torn away from her when she arrived at the border. The youngest was 6 months old. She had been in detention for several weeks, and she had no idea where they were. She had not been able to communicate with them. The Reunite Act would require that guidance be in place to ensure the swift reunification of separated families and that parents and children can communicate with one another until they are back together. That should be the minimum. It would facilitate critical access to attorneys and other service providers who can provide families with the assistance they need to make informed decisions and to navigate their legal cases. This bill would mandate that parents who have already been deported, of which we think there are hundreds at this point, be identified and ensure that others are not removed before having an opportunity to consult with legal counsel. We know that there are more effective and cost-efficient alternatives to the cruel practice of separating and detaining families. The Reunite Act would restore successful programs like the Family Case Management Program so that families can access vital community-based services to address their needs while ensuring their appearance in immigration court proceedings. Senator Merkley spoke to the 99% appearance rate for ICE check-ins and 100% appearance rate for immigration court proceedings. What is the downside of a program like that? The United States is a country that respects the rule of law. We are a country that recognizes that a child's happiness and well-being starts in the arms of a loving family. The zero tolerance policy has shocked the conscience of many and served to remind us of those basic values. The Reunite Act would restore those bedrock principles to our immigration system where they belong. Thank you.
Take questions? Two questions. The court has ordered that the families be reunited. Is this legislation too late? And also, what do you think about, in this legislation, do you make the exemption for families who are kids who've been trafficked or under or came here with abusive parents or criminal record, or do you think that those children themselves that they need to be reunited with their families?
So on the first question, this bill would put these requirements in law. So if ever again this happens, it would apply. The court order applies to those who are currently in detention, but doesn't speak to the future. And so this would codify aspects of the court order and other aspects, such as facilitating reunification in a no-cost way, and all of the other requirements that we have about examining and monitoring the detention facilities and the circumstances under which these families are housed. In terms of the concern that you've expressed about whether there are children who are the subject of abuse or trafficking, of course there will be a process always in place to determine that. But where it is clear that it is about a loving, caring parent being separated from their child, that is our main concern in terms of what we are addressing with this bill. Always being concerned about making sure that we put the child in the hands of someone who is going to love that child and not abuse that child. Do you want to? No.
Go on, you go. Yeah. I would say our American values and who we are, and the fact that we have asylum laws that say we are here, and if you are being persecuted in your country, come here and we will protect you. You can put up, and I'm not going to speak to Mexico and what they should or shouldn't be doing, but you're not going to stop individuals who cannot stay in their home countries for threat of death and or rape to them and their families from seeking help and a better life in a country that they know, that is known around the world to give opportunity and to help others. And that's who we are as Americans. That's what the United States stands for. So they will continue to come. They will continue to be here no matter what happens in other countries or in Mexico. They want a better life. They want to protect their families, and that's what they're seeking.
Well, we of course welcome eagerly a bipartisan effort to fix what is obviously wrong with the administration's policy. So that remains true, and this is meant to address a component of it. We do need a comprehensive approach. So, for example, I referenced earlier the Dunn Act. That is also with the coordination of folks on the House side and Pramila Jayapal being a leader on that side as it relates to the conditions and oversight of the conditions in the detention centers. There's other work that we are doing specifically targeting the treatment of pregnant women in this process and the abuses that are taking place in the detention facilities. That includes prohibiting those women to get the kind of health care that they need, and concerns about miscarriages and things like that have occurred. So we do need a comprehensive approach. This is a piece of it. There are other pieces. And there's no question that this is an issue that should not really even be thought of as a bipartisan issue. It should be thought of as a nonpartisan issue. This is about families. And we who put ourselves out there is saying that we care about families, and that is the way that we treat families and support families is a reflection of who we are as a country. Well, this reflects poorly on us as a country, and we need to fix it. Thank you. Okay, thank you all. Thank you.
That right, but have you been to FanFest? There's still time to go. It's down at the convention center. There's so much going on. I gotta say, there's so much going on for kids too. You can actually play baseball, you can hit in the batting cages. There's virtual reality baseball game, and I gotta say there's something maybe for the adults too, and you don't have to be too rich because it's an auction, so you're competing against other people. I want to introduce you to somebody. This is David Hunt with Hunt Auctions. This is really pretty cool, an actual live auction at FanFest for the All-Star Week.
Yeah, it's been a great week already, and it culminates for us with our big live auction the second day tomorrow. Lots of incredible pieces.
So you've already auctioned obviously a lot of things off. Tomorrow, does it kind of culminate with this really cool thing behind us right here? This has got to be very, a lot of people are going to have to want to be bidding on this.
It does. I mean, it's a
What is it?
It's a Babe Ruth game used bat, professional model bat from the early 1920s. Should end up being the most expensive piece in the sale, around $100,000 to $200,000.
For that,
it's amazing. I mean, his name still just evokes such emotion in people. Little kids that come through here, they
know about the Bambino.
They do. They see the Bryce Harpers and the Machados and the modern players, but then they come over and say, "That's a Babe Ruth ball. That's a Babe Ruth bat," and it makes them very excited.
So there's the ball.
Yeah.
So all of this gets auctioned off tomorrow?
It does. We've got the last day of the auction tomorrow, one more day of the appraisal fair. If anybody brings down things, our experts will give them an appraised value of the piece as well.
They have to be here to bid on this?
No, they can bid online at huntauctions.com. You can see all the remaining items tonight and drop your bids in.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to find out how much this brought. You've already have other things that have been auctioned off too. Tell us about some of these pictures.
The collection today was the Archives of PhotoFile, which is Major League Baseball's photo provider of licensed images. And these are the original images that they used to replicate pieces, but some of them brought just extraordinary amounts of money. We had a few Walter Johnson photos bring in excess of $10,000, and it led up to, of course, again, Babe Ruth, where this particular photograph ended up selling. The estimate was about $15,000 to $25,000, and it ended up selling for over $50,000.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing. David, thank you so much. FanFest runs, well, it's over basically for today, but tomorrow, all day long, come on down, and you can get on in. It's $30 for kids, $35 for adults. From FanFest, Gary McGrady, Fox 5 Local News.
We've got at least 1, 2, 3 homicides, 1 aggravated robbery, attempted murder, and 1 home invasion robbery.
Houston, Texas police are looking for 46-year-old Jose Gilberto Rodriguez, who they are calling a person of strong interest. Authorities believe he may be responsible for 3 murders that took place over a 4-day period. The first incident was a home invasion robbery Friday night. 62-year-old Pamela Johnson was shot and killed inside her home. Her car was found at the Willowbrook Mall on Saturday. That same day, surveillance video captured him inside the mall, and a second woman, 28-year-old Allie Barrow, was fatally shot inside a mattress store across from the mall. The body of a third victim, Edward Magana, was discovered at another mattress store about 2 miles away on Monday.
This guy's motive appears to be robbery in a lot of cases.
And all 3 victims were killed by gunfire. Houston police believe the murders point to a serial killer. They're also linking Rodriguez to the robbery and non-fatal shooting of a Metro Houston bus driver Monday.
We can't release all the details, but all these cases we feel have some linkages to each other.
But until Rodriguez is caught, Houston residents will remain on edge.
It's scary because I was here. I came to work. I didn't want to unlock my door.
Rodriguez has several previous criminal convictions. Police say he is on parole and removed his ankle monitor just a few days ago. He's not yet been charged with any crimes related to the murders. In Los Angeles, Marianne Rafferty, Fox News.
I've been doing this all my life.
Roz Halili knows these waters well.
Usually these are early mornings.
As an oyster distributor, Halili and other commercial fishermen have felt the ups and downs of the seafood industry in Galveston Bay. Hurricanes are a constant danger.
Hurricane Ike battered this region's oyster population in 2008, with Hurricane Harvey dealing a devastating blow as well. But Halili says the threat of severe weather won't deter them.
The fresh water that came through, it killed half the population or more in Galveston Bay.
To yield sustainable harvests, Halili's family business, Prestige Oysters, has been planting limestone to create reefs in the Gulf of Mexico every year over the last decade. This latest project is the first new reef on a private lease in the area in about 40 years.
What we're doing is building up that bottom to have, a good substrate for oysters, so when they begin to grow, they won't wither and die. They'll have something to attach to.
What we hope that is in the future we can restore a lot of these reefs.
Environmental expert George Guillen says oyster restoration efforts will help the ecosystem and safety for coastal residents come hurricane season.
It creates a barrier when it's big enough to large waves. It will actually dissipate some of the energy as you have waves going across these large reefs.
The oyster reefs also help battle hurricane erosion.
Being able to benefit, our business and the ecosystem at the same time, it's a great feeling.
Halili likely won't yield a harvest from this site until 2 or 3 years from now, when the oysters reach market size. But out here, resiliency is key. In San Leon, Texas, Madeline Rivera, Fox News.
And I'm here to tell you today that Washington has failed us.
In a major rebuke, California Democrats Saturday rejected the grande dame of their party, 26-year veteran Senator Dianne Feinstein,
endorsing her challenger instead, Liberal firebrand Kevin De Leon.
I'm going to work really hard to earn the votes and the confidence of many voters across the political spectrum.
De Leon is a champion of progressive causes, a torchbearer for the hard left. He authored the state sanctuary bill, favors free medical care, wants to dismantle ICE, and impeach President Trump.
We have a lot of Democrats who want a stronger voice, someone who's not on the sidelines, but rather someone who's on the front lines to contend with this president who seeks to do everything within his power to undermine our great state, California.
Analysts say the endorsement reflects the increasing strength of liberals and progressives within the state Democratic Party.
To those who are on the left in the Democratic Party in California, she's considered a moderate who compromises too much with Republicans or even with Donald Trump.
The endorsement means De Leon's image will appear in millions of campaign pamphlets and show up in the official state voting guide as the party nominee, not to mention campaign money and volunteers.
As the report says.
But will it make a difference? Feinstein won the June primary with 70% of the Democratic vote and 44% overall, compared to just 12% by De Leon. Feinstein has $10 million in campaign cash compared to less than $700,000 for her challenger, according to federal reports.
If this gets at all close, and I doubt it does, but if it gets at all close, it's the Republicans who are voting who will probably decide the race.
And that could help Republican turnout in several close House races. Feinstein's campaign played down the snub, saying the 85-year-old is confident of being reelected to a 5th term. In Los Angeles, William LaJeunesse, Fox News.
I'm calling from the Health Insurance Enrollment Center.
This is Todd with
I'm
the
calling
Fulfillment
because health
Department.
insurance
It's the evolution of the modern day scam. What started on the phone with what's called vishing,
This call is officially a final notice.
then moved to email or phishing.
And now you're kind of seeing an uptick in a wave of smishing. So that's text messages that are coming in on your phone.
Bill Harden with Charles River and Associates says texting is the way many of us now talk, and bad guys want to confuse you through text by pretending to be a utility, store, even your bank to get your account information.
So you've got all these filters and everything within email, but on text messages, you really don't have that kind of filter.
So Harden and his team demonstrated for us just how easily and quickly criminals can set up these fake sites and send you bogus messages meant to trick you into handing over usernames and passwords.
We're going to play the bad guy, all right? And with that, we're going to start a campaign.
For this example, Harden created a fake Verizon website. It's identical to the real thing except for the URL.
So step 2 is now I've got to go acquire data, so I got to go buy phone numbers that I want to go out and smish.
Harden says criminals can buy thousands of phone numbers for cheap. He can send this bogus message to the numbers he bought with a link to his site, not Verizon's.
I sent the message. I have users that clicked. I have users that entered in credentials. And now I have all of these username and passwords.
Harden says this database of usernames and passwords can go for thousands on the dark web and only took minutes to set up.
It's quick.
Is it cheap?
It's cheap, yes.
What's also quick and free is how you can protect yourself.
Rotating your username and password is always a great start.
That way, if criminals try to use your credentials, it won't work. Protect your identity and bank account. Dawn Hasbrook, Fox News.
Professional wedding photographer Katie Kuhn takes a lot of pride in capturing that special moment between a bride and a groom. But she says a con artist posing as a would-be groom captured her attention last week.
Or he wasn't filling out the contract. He said he was having issues. And then he started getting really angry with me about signing the contract.
These were phone conversations.
These were text messages.
Okay. Have you ever had a phone conversation?
I tried to call him and he wouldn't pick up the phone.
Kuhn says the man sent her this check for $3,200 after only one email conversation, then asked for a partial refund of $1,300 just a couple of days later.
So what he said was, you know what, I've decided to cancel the birthday. The expenses are becoming too much. And can you send me that money back? And I said, well, I can give it to you at the wedding, or you can meet me in person. Because at this point, I knew something wasn't right.
The North Fulton photographer reported her concerns to Milton police last Wednesday. She says they did not take a report since she never cashed the check and no crime was committed. But she still wants other wedding photographers and vendors to step back and take a good look at the bigger picture when a potential customer looks suspicious.
It's not believing absolutely everything that somebody says over the internet or in your email. It's talking to people on the phone, trying to have an actual conversation with somebody to find out if they are genuine, if they are real, and just use your judgment.
Thank you so much. Struggling to keep the tears at bay, Walter Carr got the surprise of his life Monday. A new car presented to him after his story of determination went viral.
I just wanted to get to my job and show people that I was dedicated to the job.
The story begins early Saturday morning. Walter, all set to start a new job at 8 a.m., helping a family move in Pelham. The problem, he lives in Homewood, and his car was broken down. So what does Walter do? He decides to walk to work, setting out at midnight to go the 20-plus miles.
When I first saw him, he was actually sitting down, so I guess he was catching his breath.
By now, it was 3 a.m. Pelham police officer Mark Knighton stopped to ask what Walter was doing. Walter told him he was walking to work and still had another 15 miles to go. That's when Knighton and 2 other officers took him to breakfast. Another officer then took him to his job, where he was to help Jenny Lamey's family move.
Just the heart that it took to do that, and you know, I just keep thinking about him. It's almost like I use them. Just think about Walter. What would Walter do?
Deeply moved, Lamey posted the story on Facebook, where it went viral. She was hoping to help, but Luke Markland, the CEO of Bellhops, which Walter works for, beat her to it by giving him one of his own personal cars.
I love helping people, so this car it's making it much easier to do what I need to do to help and expand myself out more.
Melanie Posey, WBRC, Fox 6 News, on your side.
Even on the cloudiest of days, the art of the neon sign in Tucson stands out. On Congress, 4th Avenue, 6th, and on the south side near Broadway, where there's a man with an electrifying passion for his collection.
I can't explain it, but I do.
Jude Cook has worked with signs for decades, restoring several well-known icons around town.
There we go.
He's collected them for just as long.
The collection got so big that at one point I said, you know, you're going to need to move these to your office. And so, you know, a lot of them migrated there.
2 years ago, after visiting neon sign museums around the country, the couple had their own bright idea.
We should do this, you know.
He and his wife are opening Ignite, a sign art museum in Tucson, a city known for its neon.
We had a nice collection of signs largely because we were on one of the main driving routes from Mexico to Canada.
Familiar commercial logos and replicas of local light-up landmarks deck the walls.
The stuff that's nearest and dearest to me is the stuff for Tucson.
It's a kind of buzz he hopes will educate people.
The signs get taken for granted. You know, they're there, but they're there until they're gone, and then they're gone, they're completely forgotten.
And preserve history, just as he has in years past. On the south side, Heather Jansen, KOLD News 13, live local 8 breaking.
And I can tell you guys that is definitely a store that I think that I would actually be really keen on visiting out there in the Southwest. But hey guys, going to some other more important kind of news around here. I was talking about the weather earlier. This is the radar for this evening, and our meteorologists were talking about the storms coming through here. They're hoping that they do end around 6 p.m. Eastern time, possibly a little bit later, leaving Nationals Park a little bit wet and soggy for tonight's All Star game. But you can actually see on our live camera here of the White House, take a look sort of in the lower right corner, right midway down, you can see some of those droplets. You can just barely see the rain coming down, but it is coming down here in Washington. So we are watching the weather as well as sort of getting ready for all this fanfare leading up to tonight's All-Star game, which starts at 8 o'clock Eastern time. We do have one other piece of video coming in here from the Everglades, jumping down to Florida area. Check it out. The camera's kind of moving around right now, but there's some report of a small plane crash. No word on anybody that was injured in this crash or how many people were on board, but once the camera kind of pans over back to that crash scene, you'll be able to see the small plane and where it landed, kind of in the middle of that green, thick area of brush there along the highway. Authorities are saying they believe there is another small plane that is involved in this, but they have not honed in on that yet. Take a look at this aerial footage for now. We'll get some more information for you. Again, a small plane crash in the Everglades is what they're honing in on now. And you'll see when that camera zooms in a little more picture of that plane.
Other one. They're pointing over there. You see something. These guys are going to be bugging out here in just a second. Well, we're looking at the fuselage from tail to nose here, so that's why it looks. (836 News, Skyforce 836). All right, that's going to be the third victim,
So again, guys, just warning you that this is all raw, unedited live video. So what you're seeing is pretty much what you're getting, and unfortunately what looks like to be the third victim of this small plane crash in the Everglades. There, the men there who are essentially waist deep in the water. You can see those rescue boats kind of motoring through that marsh area, as is the case in Everglades National Park. That's how they have to get to these victims, and unfortunately, where we heard no injuries reported earlier, unfortunately we're now hearing kind of over the intercoms there, the reporters saying that this is the third victim. So if that is indeed true, that's possibly the third body that they've recovered from this crash. Super, super sad, unfortunate case there. And you can see there the rescue workers really up to their waist, even higher in that water. And there is the remnant of the small plane kind of next to that rescue boat. The helicopter now overhead, kind of causing some of that air to push through and everything kind of blowing around. It's really incredible video because you don't often see sort of this hover over this marshland of area, and you'd think they'd also have to be kind of wary of what else is in the park, in the water, alligators and such, things that they need to be aware of in this park. But they seem to be sort of suited up and know what they're doing down there in these murky conditions. Again, that's what we're hearing over the reporters' kind of words here, that is the third victim of this small plane crash. Authorities said earlier there possibly was another plane involved in this, so we believe that they are searching for that as well. If we have any more information, we'll bring that to you from this video. Again, discretion advised for unedited video here of this crash.
Yeah. They got another one, another body.
Again, guys, if you're just joining us, you're watching rescue efforts in the Florida Everglades in West Miami-Dade. This happened shortly after 1 p.m. Eastern time, and you can see right here live rescue efforts to kind of recover parts of that plane and make sure they have all the victims. Now, initial reports said that they weren't sure how many people were aboard the plane, how many people were injured, but we were hearing kind of some dialogue over the airwaves here that there were at least 3 victims. Not quite sure if that has been confirmed yet, but they are responding to that scene and sort of looking into if there is another small
836
plane
News, Skyforce 836.
involved in this.
Just for your time code, they did start a small fire here. If you write it down now. Let's go ahead and do an orbit. Yep. Well, we're probably above it too. Yep. It's police, yeah. (836) News, Skyforce 836. They're both from the same place, Edwin. Both the aircraft from the same place. Both aircraft are from the same place. There are two of aircraft. There are two, and both of them are from the same place. The word was place, the same place. I'm sorry. They're both from Dean International. Sorry. The blue and white aircraft, there are two people, two souls, and on this aircraft there was one. That's the one that was in the water. All right. All right. (836) News, Skyforce information, 836. FYI, the road is closed. Southwest 8th Street's closed. They landed the Miami-Dade police. One of their helicopters is down on the ground there. The road's closed. The road, Southwest 8th Street, is closed. They landed one of the helicopters down here on the roadway, so the road is closed. No, that's a police helicopter. The air rescue helicopter is still flying. Yep. Yeah, I'm hearing the same thing on my radio here, sure. Say again? I don't know who runs it. I think I'm pretty sure it's Indian property. No, they're Tamiami. I think we've done a story on that aircraft, the one the blue and white one. I know we've done International before. But. Go ahead. Okay, stand by on the fuel. Hang on. What do you figure time-wise? We've got about 50 minutes. 50 minutes of fuel. 50 minutes. 5-0. Okay. They are calling this a mid-air collision. Mid-air collision. Nope. Yeah.
All right, guys, again, you're watching coverage here, aerial views of this small plane crash that, according to what we're hearing over the airwaves now, we're hearing that it's possible that two small planes actually collided mid-air, and both were unfortunately ended up plummeting down into this area of the Everglades. And this is actually quite a remote area of the Florida Everglades. They said that some sort of chopper saw one of the wings sticking out of that marshy kind of grass area that you're seeing right here, and they saw the words Dean International on it. Now, Dean International is a flight school down in Miami-Dade area, and there have been other accidents in the past few months involving these planes. There was one recently where a student actually took a plane and crashed it into the Everglades. He ended up dying in the crash, and it's so remote that they had to find rescue boats that were able to get to this location. So these airboats were used to kind of motor their way through and then find this scene right here. And as you know, and we told you earlier, discretion is advised in this video because it is a raw video and we're seeing an unfortunate kind of scene here with bodies and all that. So while there is no exact word as to how many people were on board, we were hearing that there were possibly at least 3 that they had recovered. Now, that is not confirmed yet, so we're not sure about the number of bodies, but a second area of debris was spotted just a distance away from that first area. And you can see that trio right here, I'll bring this up full screen, of boats are the rescue boats that are kind of coming together to kind of meander their way through this remote area of high grass. As it appears, one of the wings was sheared off one of the fuselage of the plane. So that main kind of body of the plane, one of the wings was sheared off that and was discovered by someone in that chopper. So you can see here the rescue workers still kind of loaded up on this airboat, and they're motoring their way through to kind of get to the second site of the small plane crash. Again, a collision down in the Everglades, Miami-Dade, southwestern area of Miami-Dade, and that's what you're looking at now. I just want to quickly tease out also coming up very shortly, President Trump just made some remarks upon his arrival back in the States about that Helsinki summit yesterday with Russian President Vladimir Putin, and so we're going to have his remarks brought to you just moments after they happen. Once we get that tape coming in, we're going to play that out for you. So that's coming up shortly. For now, guys, we're going to stay on this coverage. Unfortunately, some sad news down there in Florida, and a close-up of the rescue workers getting to that second spot for where those planes collided and eventually fell down into that high grass area.
Guy smoking a cigarette. Production control is going to go over and join you. Hello, hello. Hey, man. Okay. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yep. Yes, sir. Oh, yeah. 2 minutes. Oh, okay. Okay, dokie. Yeah, Lynn, frantic calls into the 911 system and from the Miccosukee Police and folks out here at Coopertown. That's on Southwest 8th Street, about 220th Avenue. This location that we're looking at right now, one of two aircraft believed to be involved in a mid-air collision. Fire rescue folks indicating, and first responders, 21 first responders at the scene within a matter of minutes here. Not a whole lot that they could do for the two people on board this aircraft, and there's a second aircraft. You can see the debris field as we swing the camera here. You'll see a little flecks of white down there, and we're going to continue to move that camera. We have still first responders in airboats here in an area where we had a small fire break out from this crash of the two aircraft, and then there's the second aircraft over here. This was the area where we saw first responders pull the body of a third victim out of the water. That body is in an airboat that's on its way back towards Cooper town, where they're going to set up a command post. We want to bring the camera back out here, and as part of a traffic advisory, tell you right now that Southwest 8th Street right at Coopertown is closed. One of the two helicopters that were out here, this is the Miami-Dade police helicopter, has landed down here on the roadway. Because of that, they have closed off this roadway in both directions, so the road is going to be closed here until this investigation is wrapped up. There's still a second aircraft doing a search for any other victims, any more possible victims in this area, and of course, Lynn, as we get more information, we'll get it back to you. For now, that's all we have at Skyforce HD. I'm Ralph Raven reporting live. Oh, yeah. Yep. Hey, Stan, we're up the Pro Channel. Thank you, Stan. Okay. 836, oh. 836 News, Skyforce 836. We're going to go ahead and head out if you're good for now, and we'll call you when we land on the ground and plan our strategy. Is that good? Right. Just one thing, weather permitting, we are starting to see some storms building up out here. Yes, sir. All right.
All right, guys, unfortunately that footage got cut abruptly. We weren't quite sure we were prepared for that, but we saw a good amount of that really, really unfortunate scene down there in the Everglades, Florida. Right now, though, we are awaiting that video of President Trump, his first comments after the summit in Helsinki, and it's really just upon his return. He made a couple of his first tweets upon his return this morning, just before 9 a.m. And one of them right here, let me bring this to your screen quickly, switching gears here. President Trump saying he had a great meeting with NATO, raising vast amounts of money. I had an even better meeting with Vladimir Putin of Russia. Sadly, it is not being reported that way. The fake news is going crazy. So again, criticizing the media this morning. This was just after 7 a.m. Eastern time, one of his earliest tweets this morning after his trip. And we're told that that video is coming in shortly to us. So we're going to make sure that kind of spins back and rewinds, and then we're going to play it out for you. His very first comments on that summit. This all coming after many people from his own party, Republicans alike, and some of his former staff, Anthony Scaramucci, former White House communications director, former Speaker Newt Gingrich, coming out to criticize what was said in Helsinki, and a lot of people, lawmakers on the Republican side, also coming out with their own reaction from that. So stay with us here on our channel. We're gonna have more reaction coming up next. I just have a video coming in now from some lawmakers on the Hill also reacting. So we're gonna throw you over there, and then we'll be watching to make sure we get that video of President Trump right when it comes down to us. We'll play it out for you here on Fox 5 Live, so stay with us.
Which would delay this hearing until well past the election.
And the more that people see of Judge Kavanaugh, the more they like him, which has prompted the media to point out that Democrats are really struggling for a message. In fact, have gotten quite desperate in their attacks. New York Times, Washington Post have both pointed out that many of the statements that have been made by Democrats are over the top, hyperbolic, and in fact, one rated a 4 Pinocchio rating from the Washington Post. So the Democrats are really struggling, and the reason they're struggling is because this is a mainstream pick who has the right temperament to be on the Supreme Court, who is well respected in the legal community and highly qualified. And so as he makes his stops around, he's visiting with a lot of our members up here. Anybody who wants to has an opportunity to sit down with him. He's impressing on a daily basis. And we look forward to continuing the process, as Senator Cornyn pointed out. If you follow what Justice Sotomayor and Justice Gorsuch had in terms of a process time, it was 66 days, which would put him in the middle of September. And so Democrats will no doubt try to delay and obstruct, and clearly they are trying to discredit this judge, but as the media themselves have pointed out, desperately grasping to come up with a message, because they just don't have a very good one because this judge is so well qualified.
Well, President Trump, when he visited with NATO, was very strong and firm with relationship to the issue of dependence of our NATO allies on Russia for energy, and specifically natural gas. And it's time to try to end that dependence. Russia is trying to develop a pipeline called Nord Stream 2, which would make Germany even more dependent on Russia for natural gas. And when Vladimir Putin thinks about natural gas, he thinks about politics and power and money, and it's time for our NATO allies to divest themselves and diversify their energy opportunities, because energy is called the master resource for a reason. It powers our countries, our economy. It is a force multiplier. It is an instrument of power, and the more you're dependent upon someone else for that energy, the more beholden to them they would become. I'm going to be introducing legislation tomorrow to make it easier for our NATO allies to work with us with the abundance of natural gas that we have, that they can buy from us. I want to do two things with the legislation. One is mandatory sanctions against those involved with the Nord Stream 2 pipeline related to Russia, and then make it easier for NATO and the United States to work together on a transatlantic energy alliance, specifically to make sure that they can become more connected to the United States for their energy needs and less dependent on Vladimir Putin and Russia.
Well, on the topic of Russian interference,
The Senate Intel Committee that I serve on has reached the same conclusions that the Director of National Intelligence, Dan Coates, has reached, that the CIA Director, who's now the Secretary of State, reached, that clearly the Russians tried to interfere in our elections. I think if you look at the indictments that came out a few days ago, that's the likely path that they used to do that, which makes it even more clear that the Russian government was involved in that effort, and that effort was directed and financed by the government, no matter what Mr. Putin says. I'd also point out that the Senate, the Rules Committee, is looking at what we can do to share information better with local officials that conduct elections. There is no reason to believe that the election process itself was impacted in any way, but there's every reason to believe that that is critical infrastructure, and we have to be more defensive of that system in the future, knowing of all the ways into systems by lots of people. And so we're going to continue to work on those topics. We're going to continue to do that based on the belief that Russian interference was real, that they have no interest in helping us do anything, and we have to be alert and vigilant where not only Russians are involved, but anybody else is involved that could in any way cast a doubt about the people's elections and the way they cast their votes and the way those votes are counted.
4 years ago today, nearly 300 people were killed when a Russian missile system was used over eastern Ukraine to shoot down a Malaysia Airlines flight. Russia has not only downed the commercial airliner, it invaded its neighbors, Georgia and Ukraine, supports the murderous Assad regime and our enemies in Afghanistan. It's engaged in active information warfare against Western democracies, including meddling in the United States elections 2016 and elsewhere. Earlier crossed yet another line when they poisoned 2 individuals on Allied soil in a chemical agent attack. I've introduced legislation to require the State Department to consider within the next 90 days whether or not Russia should be listed as a state sponsor of terror, and I hope that legislation will be heard soon.
What does it say about the state of our government that you can stand here and reassure Europe that we are their friends?
Well, I think it's important for our friends to hear from their friends. And yeah, well, I mean, I think it's important for the Europeans to know how the Senate Republican majority feels about the structures that were painstakingly set up over decades that have worked to maintain world peace and to have some process by which we can enter into trade agreements and other things. So I just think it was important for for our friends and allies to hear from us.
Are you concerned about that? And of course, if there were that there would be potential for a Senate trial, how would you handle that?
I'm not going to address a hypothetical like that. I think it's pretty far-fetched and probably not worthy of comment. Yeah.
Do you feel like there's trust with you and the Republican conference with how the president approached Europe, how the president has approached Russia over the course of the last week?
Look, I'm not here to critique anyone else. I'm here to speak for myself, and you've heard from others this morning, who are standing behind me, about our views about our friends and allies. And I want them to understand that in this country, there are a lot of people in both parties who believe that these alliances, painstakingly built in the wake of the end of World War II, are important, and we want to maintain them.
Is there anything that Congress can or will do to support those alliances or to push back on Russia or the president's comments about Russia, other than just offering words of support?
Well, I mean, there's some possibilities. Senator Rubio, for example, has got a bill that targets the 2018 election cycle we're right in now, with, as I understand it, potential penalties if the Russians do it again. So yeah, there's a possibility that we may well take up legislation related to this. In the meantime, I think the Russians need to know that there are a lot of us
who fully understand what happened in 2016, and it really better not happen again in 2018.
On trade.
Hey, Frank.
Hi. Where's our colleague Loftus here from the Republican committee? Is he not around these days? I used to be here.
Yeah.
Maybe he's on vacation. I haven't seen him for a couple of weeks.
Huh. Yeah.
We're trying to cook up a little project. I'll talk to him later.
Okay. Done yet? Nope. As much as you like it to do, we ain't got that.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm proud to be joined by three of my great colleagues, Senators Menendez, Cardin, and Shaheen. Now, yesterday marked one of the worst days for any president of the United States and his actions in memory. On foreign soil, President Trump said the United States was equally to blame with Russia for the state of the relationship between the countries. He trashed American intelligence, took the word of the KGB over the word of the men and women who work so hard at the CIA. The president's behavior has left everyone in the United States scratching their heads. His behavior was so bizarre, so weak, so deleterious to American interests and our national security that millions of Americans are left wondering if Putin indeed has something over the president. That is the most logical explanation of the president's behavior. So now the question looms. What will the Senate do in response? Republicans seem to be shrugging their shoulders, some of them, claiming they've done all they can. Statements are not enough. We need action, and we cannot act unless our Republicans join us in bipartisan action. So here are a few things that the Senate can do immediately in response to the president's disastrous summit. First, we can ratchet up sanctions on Russia, not water them down. The sanctions were passed 98-2 here in the Senate. They haven't even been fully implemented. And we want to make sure that they are not weakened in any way at all, as some on the House Republican side may be attempting to do. Second, and probably most importantly, our Republican colleagues need to immediately join us in demanding open and public testimony from the President's national security team that was in Helsinki and any others who might be privy to what happened. We're worried about what the President said publicly. We're even more worried about what happened in those 2 hours when the President was alone with Mr. Putin. Does anyone believe that he was tougher on Putin in secret than he was publicly? Why did he not want anyone else in the room if he was so sure and confident that what he did would stand the light of public scrutiny? So we need these people to come. We need Secretary Pompeo. There's some talk he may, but there's been no commitment that we have seen. And we want DNI Coates, Ambassador Huntsman, and many others to come before us. This is too important not to get the full story out before the Senate and the American people. Next, where are the notes from that meeting, the contemporaneous notes? What did the President agree to? Was Secretary Pompeo briefed afterwards? Did he write anything down? Were any other members of the President's team? The contemporaneous notes that were taken, particularly in regard to the 2-hour closed meeting, should be turned over to Congress immediately. I'm calling on Leader McConnell and his leadership team to immediately request a hearing with the people I mentioned, Pompeo, Coates, Huntsman, and the rest of the national security team. And I'm calling on Leader McConnell to join us in demanding the contemporaneous notes that were taken. Next, our Republican friends must end the attacks on the Department of Justice. Want to pass legislation? Yes. The most important legislation we can pass, given the President's attitude, is the bipartisan bill to protect the special counsel that Senators Coons, Booker, Tillis, and Graham authored, along with Senators Whitehouse and Blumenthal, and that passed the Judiciary Committee. Put it on the floor immediately. Immediately. If you mean what you say, Leader McConnell. If you're going to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. Fourth, the President must release his tax returns. and insist on the extradition of the 12 Russians indicted for election interference. We need, given all of the innuendo, this president should have released his tax returns before he was elected. But what happened yesterday makes that release imperative. He should do it. Our Republican colleagues should join us in asking him to do it. And finally, we must move to protect our election security. To its credit, the Senate, in bipartisan fashion, led by some of the people around me and many others, passed $380 million in the last omnibus for election security. But more is needed, and more protection is needed, more substantive legislation. There is legislation by Senator Klobuchar, there's legislation by Senator Van Hollen, there's legislation by Senator Harris, and others. That is necessary, hardly sufficient, but it is necessary to do. We hope our Republican colleagues won't just go tisk, 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 but will actually act to protect the security of America and join us in doing it in a bipartisan way. Senator Menendez.
Well, thank you, Mr. Leader. As someone who has served 26 years on the House and Senate Foreign Relations Committee, from a foreign policy point of view, I believe yesterday was a day of infamy for the United States. The world saw a supplicant American president capitulating, fawning, and ultimately aligning with Putin, an authoritarian leader who orchestrated an attack on our democracy and continues to do so as we speak. The president turned his back on our own intelligence community, which unanimously agrees that the Russian government carried out attacks intending to disrupt and interfere with our elections, and continues to do so. He disregarded his own government, disregarded the advice and expertise of foreign policy professionals, military leaders, and diplomats who have served this country for decades. From my perspective, he violated his oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. And his comments belie any justifiable explanation for someone who seeks to uphold American ideals, advance American interests, and protect America's security. To suggest that it was a great offer for President Putin to send Russian intelligence officers to cooperate in an investigation when they are the perpetrators of the crime is beyond belief. And so I have to ask my Republican colleagues, is the price of siding with Putin and against our own democracy worth a domestic agenda of tax cut and a Supreme Court nominee? Or are you going to exhibit the patriotism that's called for at this time? We as a nation must know exactly what the president discussed and what he may have promised to President Putin. The American people have a right to know, and President Putin and his government are wasting no time capitalizing on yesterday's meeting and using it to advance their national interests. We cannot afford to be blindsided or outmaneuvered. Today, the Russian Ministry of Defense publicly stated that it was preparing to start implementing an agreement that the president apparently struck in Helsinki with President Putin, an agreement that neither the Congress nor the American people have been informed about. So on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, we want to know these answers to these questions. What specific topics did you discuss? What were the suggestions that President Putin made to you? Did you discuss any changes to international security agreements, and if so, what are they? Did you advocate for the extradition of the 12 Russian intelligence officers indicted last Friday? Did you make any commitments about the U.S. role regarding Syria? Did you press Russia to return to compliance with the INF Treaty and halt its nuclear threats against Europe? Did you discuss U.S. sanctions on Russia, including CAATSA sanctions? And if so, what did you agree to? Did you call upon President Putin to withdraw from Crimea and eastern Ukraine so that those are returned to the sovereign government of Ukraine? Did you discuss NATO military exercises scheduled for this fall, and did you agree to roll back or change the nature of those exercises? Did you discuss U.S. security assistance to the Ukraine and make any concessions regarding their continuation? What, if anything, did you commit to? I just simply say the Secretary of State has to come before the committee in open session, and talk about what has transpired here. And we need to have the administration fully implement the mandatory sanctions. You know, the Congress spoke 98-2 for mandatory sanctions against Russia without waivers of an administration. It spoke then of the concern that Congress had that this president might not implement sanctions if he was given waiver authority. We did not. First time in all the sanctions I've ever helped write that there was mandatory sanctions without waivers. We need to see those implemented. And we need to show the American people what it means to be a patriot over a partisan, especially at a time and that our essence of our democracy is under attack by a foreign government. And that attack under any view, Republican or Democrat, must unite us together, because that's an attack against our country. It continues to exist to undermine our democracy and our elections, which is the sacrosanct part of our Constitution.
Thank you. Senator Carter.
Thank you. Yesterday, President Putin said that he was not engaged in interfering in our election. That didn't surprise us. It was a lie. We know that. We know that he interfered in our election. And now the President of the United States says he believes Mr. Putin rather than our intelligence agency. It was a horrible day for America, for our national security, for our global leadership, and for our democratic allies around the world that look to the United States for leadership. Today we had a hearing in the Helsinki Commission. I think that's appropriate since the summit took place in Helsinki. But that hearing was on the 10th anniversary of Russia's invasion of Georgia. Mr. Putin saw an opportunity 10 years ago where he could invade Georgia and disrupt Georgia's accession into NATO. He recognized that there was an opportunity, an opening, and he took advantage of it. He saw an opening in Ukraine, he took advantage of it. He saw an opening in U.S. elections in 2016, he went forward with it. He sees openings in Europe, did the same thing. And now he has the President of the United States saying that what he did in 2016 was okay, didn't do anything. It makes us so much more vulnerable to Mr. Putin's activities going forward. We are at risk in our 2018 elections because Mr. Putin knows he can interfere and he has the President of the United States on his side. A very sad day for our country and for our democratic institutions. We need to take action to protect ourselves. And the Republican leadership that controls the agenda in the House and the Senate, we need to use the independence of the Congress to protect the national security of America, particularly in light of what President Trump has done with Mr. Putin. That means our committees have to be actively engaged in oversight hearings, bringing in the key people to understand exactly what happened. Senator Menendez raises a lot of questions that we need the answers to. After we listened to the press conference, we were really worried about what the answers to those questions are going to be. We have a right to know what happened in that room. The American people have a right to know what happened in that room. 6 months ago, the Senate Foreign Relations Dems issued a report on Mr. Putin. It talked about his use of asymmetric arsenal. It included the use of his military, but also the use of propaganda, the use of corruption, the use of energy, the use of ways to try to bring down democratic institutions. That report spelled out that we need to take action in America to protect our social media platforms from invasion from Russia. Congress has provided resources. This administration has not used those resources. We got to demand that we protect ourselves from the attacks from Russia. We need to protect our election system. We need to have all agencies coordinated in the defense of America. And Congress needs to step up and take action and make it clear that President Trump's actions is unacceptable. That's our responsibility as an independent branch of government. And I thank our leader for bringing to attention those items that must be acted upon by the Congress. And with that, Senator Shaheen.
Well, yesterday, President Trump handed global leadership and stature free of charge to Vladimir Putin, to a man who brutally murders his own citizens who disagree with him, and who rules a country with an economy that is half the size of California. Now, make no mistake, despite what the president said, Putin is not a competitor He is an adversary, pure and simple. It was disgraceful to watch President Trump side with Putin over the men and women of our intelligence community, over the FBI who are working to protect our nation from Putin's aggression. These public servants need a president who will have their backs. President Trump owes them an apology, and going forward, he owes them his unwavering support. And Congress must convene public hearings, as my colleagues have said, with administration officials on the Helsinki summit.
All right, guys, cutting right back to the newsroom just briefly. I'm here with Tom Fitzgerald.
Hey,
if you're on with us
long time no see.
on YouTube or Facebook, we're going to cut right over to the president's remarks. These were just moments ago, his first comments since that Helsinki summit yesterday, Tom.
The blowback on this has been incredible, not only from Democrats, as you would expect, but Republicans. None of them happy about the president seemingly doubting U.S. intelligence findings that Russia did indeed meddle in the 2016 election. They also took issue with some of the other things the president had to say. This was not where the White House wanted to be today. They wanted to do a victory lap today, or what they thought was a successful summit in their view. That news conference yesterday certainly has turned this completely around, and they are now in damage control mode right now.
They are. What does he need to say to sort of assuage the thoughts of these Republicans?
Right out of the gate, the president needs to say definitively that he believes United States intelligence agencies. Seems like a very basic thing, but he didn't say that yesterday. There was also a moral equivalence that went on yesterday, whereas when he said the United States and Russia were both equally responsible for the state of the relationship right now. From the viewpoint of the United States and a lot of the intelligence officials, they took issue with that, and very seriously, because of the fact that there are differences between the United States and how Russia conducts their businesses, and those need to be stated, and stated none more so than the President of the United States himself.
Yeah, wow. Well, we're just waiting to make sure this tape is queued up for you. Again, this happened just a few moments ago. We're going to cut right into his remarks. We're still waiting for this tape, as you see, but notably, a lot of his former staff members came out to kind of make remarks. Anthony Scaramucci, former House Speaker Newt Gingrich had some comments. I mean, it was pretty interesting to see.
Well, you know, the blowback on this has been pretty remarkable. The former CIA director, John Brennan, said in his words that this was treasonous. Now, those are strong words. It's not sure that this was treasonous yesterday, but it wasn't clearly this. You know, Newt Gingrich may have hit it more on the nose than anybody when he says this might be one of the worst moments in his presidency so far, because you know the president likes to portray himself as a tough guy, that he is tough. He's shown that he is tough on all sorts of things. He's tough on illegal immigration. He's tough on our friends. He's tough on Canada. He's been tough on Germany. He's been tough on Great Britain just in the last week. So if you're going to be a tough guy and you come face to face with one of the toughest people on the planet, you know, a virtual dictator now has been in office for 18 years in Russia and rules that country with an iron fist. You have to consistently be tough with that person. And a lot of Democrats and Republicans don't think they saw toughness out of Donald Trump yesterday. They believe they saw kowtowing, and that is not what they wanted to see from the president yesterday.
I thought it was quite interesting, and again, we're checking just make sure they're at the beginning of this tape before we play it for you. But
it looks like they are. Kevin Brady seems to be talking right now from the House leadership, so maybe we can.
All right, let's jump in there, guys, and here we go. This is the president's statement from just moments ago.
Republicans are delivering on both of them. Today is about how we can strengthen America's economy even more, and we think.
All right, guys. Well, we're back in the studio, kind of watching for this to make sure it's going to happen here.
Well, explain what's going on here. What you're watching is not live television. We are live.
Yeah,
I think
we are.
But what you're watching there is, in this kind of a situation, what they will do is they'll allow a group of reporters, they call a pool, to come into the cabinet room. They have portable cameras, they have portable lights, they have portable microphones. They record what is going on in that room, and then they go back to the press filing area in the White House briefing room, and then they feed that out. You have many networks all taking that feed. They are rewinding and fast forwarding and trying to get it to the right spot. I believe they might be at that point right now, though.
All right.
Let's just step right back in.
Let's try it out. We'll make sure, maybe we'll get an alert on our system. I know you guys are all on, probably for that reason. We updated our headlines so that you guys know that is coming up next. We've been hearing from lawmakers all day. Right now, Chuck Schumer is speaking.
This way you get to enjoy a live feed coming in, and you don't know when they're actually going to roll the thing that you want to watch.
That's the thing, and he's waiting on some bites from this one.
This happens just about every single day, though, in a newsroom. So it's annoying, but it's not exactly new. What we're expecting right now and what's been going on in that room is this was supposed to be about the economy today, this meeting. It was supposed to be twofold. They were going to talk about the economy. They're going to talk about the effect of the tax cuts that they passed several months ago. And then, of course, there was going to be what they thought was this victory lap over the summit. They are still talking about the tax cuts. They are still talking about these issues that they would like to highlight, but clearly the elephant in the room right now is what went on in Helsinki yesterday. Many of the Republicans that are sitting around that table right now, they're some of the very same Republicans who were very critical about the president yesterday. And remember, at least on the Republican side, they are heading into a midterm now in just 4 months. They've got 4 months, and they're not talking right now about the good health of the economy. They're not out there talking about tax cuts. They're not talking about other issues that they would like to be talking about. They're talking about the president. Talking about the president, talking about Vladimir Putin. And if you're a Republican member of Congress trying to run for re-election, trying to get elected, that sucks the air out of the room of all the messages that you want to try to deliver. Because every time the president is dominating the news cycle, you cannot get in a word edgewise about these other issues that you do want to highlight, you do want to get out to the voters. So that is a big frustration, I can tell you from speaking to some of them in the Republican caucus about day-to-day dealing with a lot of these brush fires. And this one might be a little bit larger than a brush fire at this point. You had the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, come out yesterday,
He was
categorically
fairly neutral on this. I mean, he didn't come out too
well, I don't think anybody's
strongly.
neutral about it, but what I will say is that Paul Ryan has been very, very measured throughout his, tenure as Speaker in the Trump presidency about how he takes on challenges. So for him to come out yesterday and say categorically, Russia did hack our election, Russia is not our ally, that was a complete left turn from what the president was saying. And you don't even have to go outside of the White House for this. The Director of National Intelligence, President Trump's own Director of National Intelligence, Dan Coates, the former senator, he came out last night and restated this, finding of 17 intelligence agents that Russia did do this. Just Friday, Dan Coates had warned that the alarm was blinking red that Russia was trying to do this again. So while the president wants to talk about let's move on from the past, he spent a lot of time yesterday talking about the past, talking about the Clinton email story, talking about what the Obama administration did or did not do, and in an important way, not talking about the future. What are we doing to stop them from doing this again? How are we preventing them? And that starts at a summit. When you sit down with this person who's been doing these things to you, doing these things to your country, how are you challenging them? What assurances are you getting from them that what they did engage in, which Putin seemed to admit it to Chris Wallace last night, what are they going to do to stop it, and what are we going to do if they don't stop it?
And so that's all coming up next in this first statement, guys. President Trump surrounding this reaction, I guess, to the Helsinki summit. And we did get a few notes that he does mention the intelligence community kind of first, like you were saying, and then he goes on to talk about the economy as he was supposed to do in this meeting. So that's what we're going to be listening in for next. And I believe it's starting up shortly. So hopefully we do.
You
have
feeling
speed.
lucky?
I think
we're
going to switch it over. Feeling lucky. All right, guys, here it is. Statement from President Trump.
I met with leaders from across the region to seek a more peaceful future for the United States. We're working very hard with our allies, and all over the world we're going to have peace. That's what we want. That's what we're going to have. I say peace through strength. I have helped the NATO alliance greatly by increasing defense contributions from our NATO allies by over $44 billion. And Secretary Stoltenberg was fantastic. As you know, he reported that they've never had an increase like this in their history, and NATO was actually going down as opposed to going up. And I increased it by my meeting last year, $44 billion, and this year will be it'll be hundreds of billions of dollars over the coming years. And I think there's great unity with NATO. There's a lot of very positive things happening. There's a great spirit that we didn't have before, and there's a lot of money that they're putting up. They weren't paying their bills on time, and now they're doing that. And I want to just say thank you very much to Secretary Stoltenberg. He really has been terrific. So we had a tremendous success. I also had meetings with Prime Minister May on the range of issues concerning our special relationship, and that's between the United Kingdom and ourselves. We met with the Queen, who is absolutely a terrific person, where she reviewed her honor guard for the first time in 70 years, they tell me. We walked in front of the honor guard, and that was very inspiring to see and be with her. And I think the relationship, I can truly say, is a good one. But she was very, very inspiring indeed. Most recently, I returned from Helsinki, Finland, and I was going to give a news conference over the next couple of days about the tremendous success, because as successful as NATO was, I think this was our most successful visit. And that had to do, as you know, with Russia. I met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in an attempt to tackle some of the most pressing with Russia than we are as of a few days ago, and I think that's got
All right, guys, we're going to work to figure this out. Unfortunately, sometimes our satellites do drop when it comes to weather situations and stormy situations that we're going through right now. So we are going to make sure we have this up for you as soon as we can. Again, that did just drop for us in-house here in the newsroom. So we're watching along with you guys. Stay with us. We'll be back.
I would like to clarify, just in case it wasn't. In a key sentence in my remarks, I said the word would instead of wouldn't. The sentence should have been, I don't see any reason why I wouldn't, or why it wouldn't be Russia. So, just to repeat it, I said the word would instead of wouldn't, and the sentence should have been, and I thought I would be maybe a little bit unclear on the transcript or unclear on the actual video. The sentence should have been, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be Russia. Sort of a double negative. So you can put that in, and I think that probably clarifies things pretty good by itself. I have on numerous occasions noted our intelligence findings that Russians attempted to interfere in our elections. Unlike previous administrations, my administration has and will continue to move aggressively to repeal any efforts and repel. We will stop it, we will repel it, any efforts to interfere in our elections. We're doing everything in our power to prevent Russian interference in 2018. And we have a lot of power. As you know, President Obama was given information just prior to the election, last election, 2016, and they decided not to do anything about it. The reason they decided that was pretty obvious to all. They thought Hillary Clinton was going to win the election, and they didn't think it was a big deal. When I won the election, they thought it was a very big deal, and all of a sudden they went into action, but it was a little bit late. So he was given that in sharp contrast to the way it should be. And President Obama, along with Brennan and Clapper and the whole group that you see on television now, probably getting paid a lot of money by your networks, they knew about Russia's attempt to interfere in the election in September, and they totally buried it. And as I said, they buried it because they thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win. Turned out it didn't happen that way. By contrast, my administration has taken a very firm stance. It's a very firm stance on a strong action. We're going to take strong action to secure our election systems and the process. Furthermore, as has been stated, and we've stated it previously and on many occasions, no collusion. Yesterday, we made significant progress toward addressing some of the worst conflicts on Earth. So when I met with President Putin for about 2.5 hours, we talked about numerous things. And among those things are the problems that you see in the Middle East, where they're very much involved, we're very much involved. I entered the negotiations with President Putin from a position of tremendous strength. Our economy is booming, and our military is being funded $700 billion this year, $716 billion next year. It will be more powerful as a military than we've ever had before. President Putin and I addressed a range of issues, starting with the civil war in Syria and need for humanitarian aid and help for people in Syria. We also spoke of Iran and the need to halt the nuclear ambitions and the destabilizing activities taking place in Iran. As most of you know, we ended the Iran deal, which was one of the worst deals anyone could imagine, and that's had a major impact on Iran, and it's substantially weakened Iran, and we hope that at some point Iran will call us and we'll maybe make a new deal, or we maybe won't. But Iran is not the same country that it was 5 months ago, that I can tell you. They're no longer looking so much to the Mediterranean and the entire Middle East. They've got some big problems that they can solve probably much easier if they deal with us. So we'll see what happens. But we did discuss Iran. We discussed Israel and the security of Israel, and President Putin is very much involved now with us in a discussion with Bibi Netanyahu on working something out with surrounding Syria and specifically with regards to the security and long-term security of Israel. A major topic of discussion was North Korea and the need for it to remove its nuclear weapons. Russia has assured us of its support. President Putin said he agrees with me 100%, and they'll do whatever they have to do to try and make it happen. Discussions are ongoing, and they're going very, very well. We have no rush for speed. The sanctions are remaining. The hostages are back. There have been no tests. There have been no rockets going up for a period of 9 months. And I think the relationships are very good. So we'll see how that goes. We have no time limit. We have no speed limit. We're just going through the process. But the relationships are very good. President Putin is going to be involved in the sense that he is with us. He would like to see that happen. Perhaps the most important issue we discussed at our meeting prior to the press conference was the reduction of nuclear weapons throughout the world. The United States and Russia have 90%, as I said, and we can have a big impact. But nuclear weapons is, I think, the greatest threat of our world today. And they're a great nuclear power. We're a great nuclear power. We have to do something about nuclear. And so that was a matter that we discussed actually in great detail, and President Putin agrees with me. The matters we discussed are profound in their importance and have the potential to save millions of lives. I understand the many disagreements between our countries, but I also understand that dialogue and when you think about it, dialogue with Russia or dialogue with other countries, but dialogue with Russia in this case, where we've had such poor relationships for so many years, dialogue is a very important thing, and it's a very good thing. So if we get along with them, great. If we don't get along with them, then we won't get along with them. But I think we have a very good chance of having some very positive things. I thought that the meeting that I had with President Putin was really strong. I think that they were willing to do things that, frankly, I wasn't sure whether or not they would be willing to do. And we'll be having future meetings, and we'll see whether or not that comes to fruition. But we had a very, very good meeting. So I just wanted to clear up. I have the strongest respect for our intelligence agencies headed by my people. We have great people, whether it's Gina, or Dan Coates, or any of them. I mean, we have tremendous people, tremendous talent within the agencies. I think they're being guided properly, and we all want the same thing. We want success for our country. So with that, we're going to start a meeting now on tax reductions. We're going to be putting in a bill. Kevin Brady is with us, and I might ask Kevin just to say a couple of words about that, and then we'll get back onto a private meeting. But Kevin, could you maybe give just a brief discussion about what we'll be talking about?
Yes, sir, Mr. President. Thank you for having me.
Room of the White House, just right next door to the Oval Office. He had called together the press as before he did this meeting with members of Congress on taxes to clarify his remarks. He says that upon looking at it, that he should have said would not, and he did not say the word not, and that therefore he wanted to clarify that after his meeting in Helsinki and that press conference with Vladimir Putin. He also says he has the strongest respect for our intelligence communities and full confidence in them. There will be lots more to talk about with this and everything else. Please stay tuned to Fox News Channel and this Fox station for continuing coverage of this story and more. I'm Dana Perino in New York.
All right, guys, thank you for staying with us. We're here in the newsroom here at Fox 5 DC Local News, and we're taking our network's coverage with Dana Perino because our satellites unfortunately dropped due to inclement weather. But thank you for staying with us. There you have it, guys. President Trump's words, his first statement since the Helsinki summit yesterday, and his reaction as Republicans and Democrats alike coming out to say, hey, you need to make a statement and clarify what you meant because this went against the U.S. intelligence community. So that was President Trump's statement. Take it as you will, guys. We were listening in with you here in the newsroom. We'll have more on that in tonight's news at 5 and 6 o'clock with Tom Fitzgerald. And we'll be back on Fox 5 Live tomorrow at 11:30. Join us on our website, fox5dc.com, and on our YouTube channel. I'm Molly Nevola from the newsroom. We'll see you tomorrow.